right, we are unmuted.
All right, call to order, 7 o'clock, flag salute. Let's please.
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have any topics from the floor out there right now?
Just a minute, back up the minutes. Are there any additional corrections to the minutes?
I thought there was a correction.
What is it?
It was on page 3. Where it says the motion. I think it switches.
Matter to you, Bob? Does it matter to you?
Not really.
Okay, then wait.
Okay, I'll be taking care of the meeting tonight. Dan is home. I believe you're here with us on Zoom.
He's muted.
He's muted.
Okay.
Hello, I am here.
And
Okay.
I'm in quarantine. My wife had COVID.
Oh, sorry to hear that. Okay, any topics from the floor out there? Okay, I don't see any. At this time, topic.
Just a second,
I'd like
Russ.
to Introduce.
let me make sure there's no one on Zoom.
Oh, I forget about that.
Yeah, so we've got quite a few people in the Zoom lobby. If you have anything that you'd like to speak on that isn't on the planning commission agenda, please use the raise hand function. And we will ask you to unmute.
So can I?
Yeah, if it's unrelated to an item we're talking about tonight,
Oh, unrelated.
yeah, unrelated, yeah.
Oh, if it's related, I can't.
Well, we can, but there'll be a time later that's.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm not
You'll
seeing.
get to have your seat.
I don't know.
Have a motion and second this.
Okay.
We gotta back up. Oh, okay.
There was
Okay,
no vote.
minutes
on the
accepted.
amendment.
Yes, we're gonna vote in a minute. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Abstain.
Opposed?
Abstain.
He was not here. All right. Time for the minutes. So at this point in time, you don't have anybody on Zoom for?
Nope.
Okay.
Yeah.
At this point in time, I'd like to introduce our newest member, Steve Tosky. And he would like to take a few minutes of public.
Hello, fellow citizens of St. Helens. I know many of you, but I haven't had a chance to meet all of you. So I thought I would introduce myself so you can learn a little bit about me. My name is Steve Tosky. I met a native daughter of the city, Robin Sharp. And 32 years ago, I was lucky enough to marry her in the old church in Portland. We've been coming to St. Helens consistently since that time. We love the city, the people, the river, the pool, among other things. 3 years ago, we bought a home here with the idea we would transition our lives to live by the river where we have friends and family. I'm an attorney licensed in both Oregon and California. Our journey to St. Helens was jump-started by the COVID shakeup. I am part of the untethered workforce. I do most of my work on a computer. But I do spend a lot of time on the river where it's one of my favorite places to be. We're witnessing a renaissance for the city of St. Helens. I wanted to take the time to compliment and to thank my fellow and former planning commissioners and the city council and the citizens who formed committees and have worked so hard to make this city one of the best places to live anywhere. St. Helens is a great place to live, a great place to visit, and it's getting better every day. I'm hoping that I, along with my fellow planning commissioners, can help the city council and the citizens of the city navigate the challenging times ahead to make St. Helens an even more beautiful and wonderful place to live, work, and raise children. And I'd like to just save some more comments for the end of the meeting if I could.
Good. Well, welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Okay, it is now 7:05 p.m. The public hearing is now open. This is a quasi-judicial land use hearing. The subject on this hearing is a request for an annexation. The subject property is identified as the county assessor's map as lot 604 and 2600 on map 4N1W-6D and 4N1W-6AD. The capital applicant is Jeannie Moran. The owner is Comstock James and Chipco Trust. Because the quasi-judicial proceedings require observance of certain procedural formalities, we'll take a few moments to cover some preliminary matters and required statements. Does any member of the commission wish to declare an ex parte or conflict of interest and biases in this matter? Seeing none. Does anyone from the audience object to the ability of a commissioner to make a fair decision? Seeing none. Generally, the order of the proceedings will be as follows: required statements, staff report, applicant's presentation, those in favor of the application, neutral testimony, those opposed, rebuttal by applicant, final questions, close of the record, deliberations and decisions. Only statements are required to be made at the commencement of the hearing pursuant to city code and ORS 197.7635. Following is a list of applicable substantive criteria for this decision is St. Helens Municipal Code 17.08.040 and 17.28.030 and 1712.020. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards the applicable substantive criteria as described or other criteria in the plan, such as the comprehensive plan or land use regulations, such as found in the development code, which the person believes applies to the decision. Failure to raise an issue, including constitutional or other issues relating to the proposed conditions of approval in this hearing, in person or in writing, or failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the approving authority an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to LUBA, Land Use Appeals Board, on that issue and precludes an action for damages in certain court. Jacob.
Jenny, we're dealing with some technical issues right now, so we'll have the staff report presented by staff very shortly here.
On the chat, if you scroll down to his name, there's a little video. Can you click
We're trying to get Dan's video showing.
I'm here.
Yeah, we see you. So you don't have an option to show your video, Dan?
I hit it and it says that the host has stopped it.
Yeah, let me make you a co-host and just see if that solves it.
Okay.
Sorry, we're trying to get this kind of hybrid style working. Did that allow you to do anything, Dan? There we go.
Yeah, there we go.
There we go. Now let me get it so that the commissioners can see you. So it's among all these others though, so it's a little bit awkward.
Can you put less people on the screen?
That's okay.
How about we just do that when you speak, I can try to manage that. For now, I'm just gonna have the share screen.
Okay, I'll leave it on. If I mute myself, then I can't get back on.
Yeah, I would just leave yourself unmuted if you don't mind.
Okay.
Okay, thanks everybody for working with us through that.
Thank
Okay.
you all.
So going into the staff report. So right now I've got a map up. The topic, as Russ indicated, is an annexation. And first I want to point out there were 3 letters in emails actually that were added into the record. All of the commissioners got emailed copies of those. And these were given after the staff report was prepared. So I just want to make sure everybody received those and had the opportunity to read them. The commissioners who are in the room got hard copies and Dan got a digital. So that out of the way. So the property we're looking at tonight it's actually two lots. One smaller one at 1 acre and then a larger one, which is 11 acres. Both of these lots abut Pittsburgh Road to the north. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit on this map to show you where they're at. So we've got Pittsburgh Road to the north along here. There's Meadowview Drive, which is this kind of curvy road and abuts the property for about 270 feet along the west side. There's some other potential street connections that would abut the property. One is Willie Lane, which currently dead ends. One is Edna Bar Avenue, which dead ends into the property. Another is Westboro Way. And then down here, which Jacob's going to talk about at the next agenda item, there's opportunity to connect to Bar Avenue directly here. But the topic tonight is just annexation of this large 12-acre property where my cursor's hovering over. So there's those 5 potential street connections. Wetlands divide this up into 3 main sections. Does everyone see the wetland map? Dan, can you nod if you see that wetland map that I'm sharing? Okay, great. So this was a wetland delineation that the applicant elected to do prior to the annexation, and I think it helps kind of inform what is developable. But for purposes of the annexation, it kind of divides the property into 3 distinct sections. So this map is actually oriented, so north is this direction. So Pittsburgh is over here. And you've got Westboro Way here to just kind of orient you. So the first main wetland is a creek that runs through the property right where my cursor is. And this creek also has a 75-foot riparian upland protection zone applied to it that you can see here. And then there's this middle section. So this middle section is divided by the creek and then 2 other distinct wetlands just south of it. So Westboro Way kind of provides access to this middle area. And then moving further south, so there's these other 2 connected wetlands at the southern half. And then there's this developable portion at the very south end. And then this is, if you keep this in mind, this is the portion that Jacob's going to talk about a little bit later when he talks about access to Bar Ave.
Where's the BPA line in relation to?
Yeah, so Westboro Way is approximately where the BPA line runs, right? Yeah. Good question.
Why is the riparian corridor 75 feet for the first creek and then 50 for the other?
So our code defines wetlands and riparian areas and determines what upland protection zone to apply to them. So that's just, that's what that riparian
The
area.
difference in the riparian.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So in the staff report itself, you can see there's some nice photos of the property kind of at different sections throughout. So there's a photo of the creek and there's some photo of kind of the southern half and the northern half. So hopefully you look through your staff report just to see what the property looks like if you're interested. So moving through the staff report, as with all annexations, we send out notice to utilities for comment. We received a comment from Columbia County Land Development Services that they support this annexation. It's surrounded on 4 sides with city jurisdiction, and so obviously they're in support of that.
3 sides.
So another criteria we would look at is compliance with our comprehensive plan. So our comprehensive plan designates this property what we call rural, suburban, unincorporated residential. And that has multiple zoning options that we can consider, and I'll consider those at the end of my report. But for the purposes of our comp plan, we have an adopted housing needs analysis, and that's been added to our comprehensive plan. So we have to consider it when we determine zoning, for example. And so I just want to point out that our comp plan, we got to consider the policies within it. The HNA is within our comp plan. So moving forward, one of the criteria for annexation involves the transportation planning rule. This is a rule set by ODOT, and it's in our Oregon revised statutes. And it talks about how any amendment, in this case, it's a zone change, requires any amendment that would significantly affect a transportation facility, that we make sure we're not messing with our transportation corridors. Sorry, no, that's okay. So generally, when we look at potential transportation impacts, we look at reasonable worst case scenario. So in this case, we look at what the county zoning is and what our city zoning options are. So the county zoning is R10, and our city zoning options range from R10 all the way to apartment residential, which we'll talk about later. If we consider R10 or R7 tonight, there's not a huge impact to transportation facilities that would warrant a transportation impact analysis at the time of annexation. Now, we always require transportation impact analyses at the time of subdivision if a certain threshold is reached. So that's not the question here. It's just whether or not we need to look at traffic impacts as part of an annexation. And so if we're considering R7 or R10 tonight, the answer is we don't. We don't need to look at a traffic impact analysis at this time. At the time of future land division and development, they would certainly need to do a traffic impact analysis. So I just wanted to point out, normally this isn't a big deal because county zoning and city zoning are usually so similar that we don't need to do a TIA at this early stage. We will do one when we know exactly how many lots are proposed and exactly what the impacts will be. So that's a little bit odd. Normally with annexations, we don't talk about this TPR rule. So we'll touch on this a little bit later when we talk about zoning options, but the short part of that is that if R7 and R10 are considered, this criteria is met. So another thing we look at with annexations are access to utilities and capacity of our utility systems. So the first, city water, we have water available in multiple locations abutting this property, and we know our water capacity is there. Our water systems can support this additional development. And there's more discussion of that in the staff report. So for sewer, it's the same case. We have city sewer available in multiple locations surrounding this property. And we also have significant capacity. We have a very large wastewater lagoon that can support additional development. We would love to have more utility customers to help us maintain that facility. So that's not a problem. And we discussed transportation just recently. So those are kind of the breakdown of all the city utilities. So we feel like there's adequate public facilities to support this annexation. So another thing we look at are state laws. And one of the state laws is that we look at our statewide planning goals. So there's a number of goals listed in the staff report that apply, goal 1, 2, 10, 11, and 12. I'm going to focus on goal 10 tonight, which is housing. And that makes a lot of sense. We've all heard that there's an affordability housing crisis in this state. And so why is that? So we're going to go into that a little bit in detail, probably more than we would with other annexations. And there's a couple of reasons for that. So I'm going to go into that now. So goal 10 has two main components. One is just inventorying housing needs for our city, which we've done with our HNA, our housing needs analysis. And then 2, it talks about supporting a broad spectrum of housing availability in both quantity and type. And that's important because our zoning has different types of residential uses allowed. So first I want to focus on inventory. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up this table in our staff report. Here. So this table is an excerpt from our housing needs analysis. The main thing to note here is kind of two things. One is that the St. Helens urban growth boundary has a sufficient amount of land to meet housing availability in the city for the next 20 years. So that was the main conclusion of our housing needs analysis. It did note that there's a small deficiency in high density residential. That's what this 8 acres in parentheses is corresponding to. However, Jacob so gracefully noted in the staff report, commercial and mixed use land can make up for that deficiency. And he pointed out 2 recent developments of general commercial land that was developed into multifamily apartments, which makes more than made up for this 8 acre deficiency. And those 2 developments were, one, the St. Helens Place apartments developed right on the highway that are all done. And then 2, the Gable Road apartment complex. So both of those were zoned for general commercial and developed with conditional use permits for multifamily. So all of that is to say that the city doesn't have a deficient need or a need for multifamily development. And so we're not urged by our housing needs analysis to zone this as high density residential. If you want to consider higher density, we can, but the housing needs analysis doesn't require it. Okay, so I'm going to move on to this table for a little bit. So this table breaks down our different zoning districts and shows which type of residential are permitted in P, not allowed, which is the N, or conditionally permitted, which is the C. I know it's really small, but hopefully you've saw this or seen it before. We've used this table multiple times. So the other thing we talk about is.
I have a question.
Sure.
So if we were to decide R10
Mhm.
as a recommendation to the council,
Yes,
the permitted use would be duplexes.
yes, and that's recent. The state required us to not treat duplexes any differently than single family dwellings. So that's why duplexes are permitted in all residential.
And that's been in the books for about 6 months.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it is very new.
Right, so the concerns about the number of houses that could be built, or concerns about number of houses, depending on what the developer comes with, R10 would potentially allow duplexes on the 10,000 foot.
Yep. Yeah. So if you remember, goal 10 focused on 2 things. One is, quantity of housing, but also type. And so that's what this table demonstrates, is the different types of housing. So I just wanted to point this out to show that R10 and R7 are distinctly different than R5 and AR with the types of housing allowed. So particularly around multifamily and attached single family dwellings. So R10 and R7 do not allow for those, typically what we would call higher density development, multifamily and attached single family dwellings. So if the commission wanted to permit those types of things, they would have to consider R5 or AR. Okay, so I'm going to go into the different zoning categories that we can consider and why, but that gives you a good framework of, what happens if you do, decide to go with R5, AR, R7, or R10. Let's see, so I'm going to pull up the map again here. And I'll just leave it on the map from here on out, unless there are questions. Okay, so moving through the staff report and the different criteria. So this next criteria, E, is an interesting one because we've never had to deal with it. Both Jacob and I have never had to address this criteria for annexations, which is rare, or, Jacob's been here for quite some time and still we've never had to address it. So I want to read it out loud. So it says, if the property exceeds 10 acres in gross size, the city has to show a need for such land if it's designated as residential. And so in the staff report, we've demonstrated that need. And so I want to point out a couple things. There was a study done by DLCD and the Oregon Housing Community Services in 2021. So very recent. And it said that over the next 20 years, Oregon will need about 584 new homes. Nearly 1/4 of these units are needed now to accommodate today's population. That 140,000 homes would overcome Oregon's chronic underproduction of housing. Begin making progress towards this need over the next 5 years, the state would need to add between 145 to 195,000 units. In other words, Oregon housing developers would need to produce between 30,000 and 40,000 units every year. And over the past 5 years, Oregon has only seen an average of just about 20,000. And so to leave this property in the county does not support the needed housing in Oregon. That's the whole point of this, that we know there's a housing shortage, and to use county density for this property, it doesn't make any sense. So we wanted to address this criteria by saying, you know, we know that there's a statewide crisis of housing, and so we need to annex this. The city needs to take this in. And then the other part of that is we need proper street connections. So there's a couple of dead ends that are greater than 150 feet with no proper fire turnaround. So like Willie Lane, for example. And so you can also demonstrate city need by just saying we need to develop these street connections in order to have a functional transportation system that's safe and effective for all the residents that access off of them. And so that's how we've addressed finding E. We said there's a need for both housing at urban density and for transportation improvements.
Can I ask another question?
Sure.
So it looks like there's gonna be a pretty large, I did not calculate this, but a pretty large section of both of the properties are gonna be set aside as riparian zones. And so if we exclude, number one, if we exclude those sections that are riparian zones, does that then potentially qualify this property for annexation without the finding of a need? And can we make that? Can we do that? Those are two probably hard questions, but I see I'd have to get my square foot meter out. So it's 23,000 square feet for one area, and then it looks like another 25,000. I don't know how many square feet there are in it.
Yeah, it sounds to me like you're trying to calculate net developable area, like what is actually developable on the property.
Well, I think that the riparian area is gonna be just what it is, and if that's the term that can be used, maybe, but I'm thinking rather than find a need based upon state standards or city right of ways, we may not need to get there if we, I think that some people are gonna be interested in making sure this wetlands is preserved and protected. And then, if we say that, the wetlands preserve is protecting, we're really taking that out of the developable space. And therefore, we don't need to find a housing need in order to annex it.
I guess the difference is whether or not the property remains in the county or not. And I would believe that the county has its own protections for wetlands because it's a state jurisdictional water, just like the Department of State Lands has protections over those wetlands. That's why I don't quite follow your question.
Well, maybe I should have just said yes to your first clarifying question. Yes, whatever that was.
I'm trying to figure the net,
Yeah, I'm trying to figure the net out. What's the net?
We'll get into that. I mean, we're
Okay,
gonna talk
all
about
right.
parcels, so that's.
All right.
Just for your thinking, acres, 43,560 square feet,
1 acre.
43,560.
Okay, so we're close.
And the more findings you add, the merrier is a lot of times the case.
What?
The more findings that you add to the basis of a decision, usually the more the merrier.
Thank you.
Because Jacob, does the county have its own protection zones?
The
for
county
wetlands?
does have some, I don't know if they apply to these, but they do have some of their own.
I'm not sure if this is the time, but Is there some kind of clarification why there seems to be between R7 and R10 that specific divided line?
Yeah.
for this?
No, it's a good question. I think both Jacob and I scratch our heads when we look at zoning maps sometimes about why certain lines were chosen.
BPA easement. It follows the BPA easement. If you look at the change in density, even further up from the orange R5 to the yellow R7, it's that same place. So sometimes someone decided that that division line was gonna be that BPA easement.
That's why it's in that location, but I don't know why they determined the actual. Yeah, it's, the zoning gods in the 1980s determined that.
You're like, well, this is a straight line.
Yeah, right. We like to follow water bodies when we do other things, so why not follow BPA easements? Yeah. Okay, so moving on, we're finally into the meat of the discussion, which is what to zone the property. So thanks for bearing with me through all that other stuff. So the City of St. Helens has a 2-map system where we look at our comprehensive plan zoning, and that is rural, suburban, unincorporated residential. And there are specific zoning categories we can take from that comprehensive plan designation. So if you go then into our comprehensive plan, it says that you can zone rural, suburban, unincorporated residential, R10, R7, or under special circumstances, R5 or AR. In the staff report, it lays out what those special circumstances for higher density is. We don't necessarily want to go into it because it's not staff's recommendation to zone these properties R5 or AR upon annexation. If we want to have a discussion about it, I'm happy to, but I think the default zoning here would be just what Jennifer mentioned is R10 following that distinction, right where that BPA easement is. The default zoning would be R10 up here and R7 for everything south of that BPA easement, following the line. That would be the default zoning if you just base it on surrounding properties, which is what we do often when we look at zoning is what is it next to? I would say we know there's a housing shortage. And so if the commission did want to consider housing need as part of their findings, maybe a more acceptable and consistent with surrounding zoning might be R7 for the entire property as opposed to R10 for the northern portion of the property. But that sort of depends on the commission's interest in pursuing this sort of larger Oregon housing crisis. Our housing needs analysis doesn't demonstrate a significant need for R7 zoning. We have a surplus there too. So I don't think that we're sort of obligated, but I think it's worth discussing. And then just to come back to that transportation conversation I had earlier, if the commission did want to consider R5 or AR, we have this issue of needing to do more traffic impact study in the area because that's such a significant zoning variation from R10, which it is currently, to R5, which is almost double the density. So that's definitely not staff's recommendation tonight. So I think that's kind of the end of my presentation. I know we have the applicant here. I know there's probably a lot of people that also want to testify. So I would open it up for questions on what I've presented, and then we can open it up for testimony. Dan, I can put your video so they can feel like you're in the room here. Does anyone have questions of staff before we move on? Okay.
I just have one clarification on something that Steve asked. Is state bill allowing duplex that's in one ownership though, right? Because that's the difference. It's not a shared wall type of agreement where 2 people own. So really, understand what I'm trying to say, not very effectively.
No, what is it?
So they're not gonna go in and put a bunch of duplexes there and then have just, I don't think it's realistic because one person has to own both of those living units. It's not like somebody could go in and 2 units and then have one owner here and one owner here.
Oh, I see. Thank you. Is that?
All true, and
Yeah, it's one property with 2 units on it. That's what Jennifer's saying. That is
Okay.
accurate. Whether those units are attached or separated, it's still one property. It's still one legal lot that one owner owns.
like a Hatfield project, is that what this, I forget.
Those are attached single-family dwellings, which are only allowed, remember, if you remember the table, in certain zoning, not in R7 or R10.
But people could, let's say, build a house and then a smaller house. And, have an in-law or, where their family members could live, so you have the one and then there's another, or maybe even a rental.
Yep.
Those would be options for single, one person owns, there are a number of projects like that where there are these auxiliary units for extended family, other uses, things like that. So that people have those options. They're actually very
Even in
valuable.
R10, that is an option. Even in our lowest density R10, our code allows 2 units to be built. So that is
Those are
true.
very valuable properties. It can be.
And that was
a unit.
mandated by the state. The state said, okay, St. Helens, you're greater than 10,000 in population. You have a requirement to allow duplexes by right, just like single-family dwellings.
Right, so the developer could have the option to build those kinds of things as an option. It could be one of the, on an R10 or R7 even.
Or a developer builds a house and then 10 years later, they say, hey, you know what? Grandma needs to be watched. We need to add that. I mean, I'm not saying that wasn't supposed to come out like that, but because of health problems. Feeling kind of like converters or something.
Has there been any clarification with covenants and restrictions? Meaning, can the developer come in and set covenants and restrictions to prevent the 2 units?
No, they can't. There's provisions, and we touched upon this when we were talking about the law revisions that says if you had pre-existing covenants and restrictions, all right, well, they're pre-existing, but new ones cannot bias duplexes.
I don't know if that's been tested yet or not.
I don't know. I don't know if it's been tested. That's always the thing. Has it been tested and taken to court and that stuff?
I had one more question about the access road, Pittsburgh Road. There was some concerns brought up about it being narrow and it's a county road. There was something brought up. Maybe I misread that.
Usually it's allowed access to the road because of the curves, sight distance and other things like Emerald Meadows.
Yeah, and this is, remember, this is an annexation.
We're not talking about.
Pittsburgh Road is something to consider when we talk about development of the property.
Right.
But for the purposes of the annexation, we know that we have transportation facilities around the site that can be served. And adequacy of those and where the access will be part of a subdivision application or some other development thereof.
But there is a concern that if there's a more dense zoning, that would then bring up transportation concerns. So, okay, so I just think I don't know where we're gonna go with it, but like you said, the more findings, the barrier.
Yeah,
Right.
your specific question was about right of way width along Pittsburgh. And we can require additional right of way to be dedicated to the city to meet our transportation needs, but only as a part of a development plan, so a subdivision. So we can address actually pulling things out of the developer once they've applied.
Right now, we'll just add the dirt and zone.
I get what follow what you're saying now.
We'll see this again.
Bring that
Yeah.
back.
We'll see it again.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
When
Alright.
a developer
Just
wants to
adding
draw the
the-
streets in and all that, and then we look at it again.
Yeah.
So are there other questions of staff? I know the applicant is ready to speak.
Yes.
We're ready? Okay.
All right.
All right, Jeannie, I know you are chomping at the bit. You've listened to all of us. I'm gonna ask to unmute and I don't know if you set the meeting up right for video, because I can't ask her to do video.
Everything that I set up was,
Yeah.
it got changed.
Yeah, I can do video if
Oh, can you? If you,
it'll let
if you,
me.
do you
Oh,
have the
you have to
option?
let me do video, but
Oh.
no, I
You have
think
to
you'd have
make
to let me.
so they can share screen.
This shouldn't have, hold on a second. I just don't understand why I have the show.
Yeah, it won't let me do it, but maybe.
Start video. Okay. All right. Try that, Jeannie.
Okay.
Okay, great. We can
Right.
see you.
Can you see me now?
Yeah, let me change my view here. Okay, try saying something.
Sure. Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you and see you.
1, 2, 3. Okay, awesome. Well, before you see me, I think it's even more important to see James and Chieko Comstock, my in-laws, as you can hopefully see. I'm trying to-
I think your background is blurring.
Oh,
Oh,
there.
the picture.
Spot where we could
Put it
see
kind
it.
of where your face is. There we go.
Right there.
There's Comstock.
Okay. So these are my my in-laws, or I call my parents as well, because their son and I have been married and we have 4 children for upwards of 3 decades. I won't say how long because I want you to know how old I am, for lack of a better way to say it that way. But the key thing for us with this entire thing is a couple of things. My father-in-law unfortunately passed away in July, and it was his mother, Sarah Comstock, whose father had built the farmhouse actually on Pittsburgh Road in 1923. So they were some of the earlier settlers of the town. It was her dying wish to develop the family farm. So it's the 12 acres here, and there was 21 more acres to the west of it. Some way to, as a tribute to the family when the 3 children decided not to continue on and farm the land, right? And some of the key takeaways that she had instilled, not just in my father-in-law, but in my husband. So in her last, couple of years of life, he actually did recordings of his grandmother talking about her vision of what she would like to see come of the family farm. That's why we've held on to it all these years. So it's not like we're just some investor that came around Johnny come lately and we don't have a vested interest in St. Helens. It's really one of those things that I am responsible for making sure that comes to fruition, and then also making sure that my mother-in-law has enough that she's taken care of, because a lot of the money that they did have we had to use for his care towards the end, right? As we know, healthcare in the United States can be very costly, so this is a bittersweet type of piece for us. So as a family piece, it's really important for us that this piece develop into a nice community. And that's the key thing so the developers that we have been talking to, we've had over the years, my in-laws have had lots of different requests to purchase the property. But because of that promise to his mother, my father-in-law has been very adamant about it's got to be something for the greater good of St. Helens. It can't just be for an individual benefit. And it's got to be something that the Comstock name will live on as a tribute to his mother, and a tribute, basically to what his family meant to the town as one of the early settlers. Does that make sense to everybody? So having said that, a couple of things with what we've done is over the last few years, and I've been working with him on this. So I've been working with him roughly since 2006. He'd been working on his vision of the community. It just unfortunately, between work, time, life, he didn't have time to see it through. But some of the key things that we're looking at were, a sense of community. So we're asking not to have apartments or high density housing, right? He wants a community that's going to be something that will be, people that are going to buy there, they're going to be invested in there. But we also hired a land use expert, a guy by the name of Matthew Larrabee, to look at everything from the state, county, and city, because the county is the one who recommended annexation to us, actually. So that was a key thing. The first time they recommended it roughly was in 2006, and it was after they had shown the 1991 urban growth boundary study. So I had referenced that here, so I have that in some of this documentation. And then again, later looking at some updated needs analysis from the overall housing from Oregon and from Columbia County, like what some of those needs and growths are, what could be done with the land. What we were requesting is that R7 be considered for the entire property so that it could be developed into a community. We are in talks with a developer to build, for example, a jogging trail that would be a tribute to the unnamed, they call it the unnamed creek, but actually it has had a name, at least for that 33 acres. It was the Comstock Creek for the longest time because it was the Comstock family farm, even though now it's residential, it wasn't at one time. And then when people ask about that other acre, I think another big thing is why this was so important to him and why it's been so important to our family is the injury that ended up ultimately taking his life was one that he sustained in the Korean War to his legs because he went off to war to help pay the taxes for the farm. So his parents didn't lose it back during that time. So the history there goes back over 100 years, roughly about 120 some odd years for the family. So for him, this thing, his dream is very personal and he was very direct of what his wishes are with that one. So when, different people come in and they talk about, can I have a smidge here or a smidge there? The reason why he never considered it is because it didn't align with his mother's vision of building out something for the greater good versus just looking at the individual, right? And so our hopes here with this last of our family legacy is to create a community that is, and truly a community that will pull together, not only tying together the streets, but also tying together the people that live there. And the reason why we were asking for R7 is if you look at the economic impact and the increased cost of the supply chain and of housing in general, given the average income for that area is roughly in the 50s. If you went to R10, it might make it out of reach for people that are, wanting to start out or not even wanting to start out, but, wanting to buy a newer home or to uplift from an existing one, right? So it's just one of those things to consider is the rising cost in supply chain and the rising cost of development that has created some of this crisis in the state of Oregon and not just in Columbia County. The other big one that we are focusing on is selecting a developer, even though we're not, from that perspective, some of the offers we've gotten, we wouldn't get the full price of what the land is actually worth but a developer that's more local to the Oregon area. So they understand the people, they understand the state, they understand the needs of the state, and they'll be able to help tie in or pull in those values that meant so much to our dad. Right. So for me, it's when people think of it, like it's not just an investment piece. This is the last of our family farm and our family legacy. And I want to make sure that, that I do right by him, if that makes sense. And our mom really does as well, because this is something that, for 41 years, this was their dream. They just unfortunately didn't get to see it through fruition. Sorry, that's. Any questions with that?
Questions for the
Does the
applicant?
creek already have a name? Comstock Creek?
It's an unnamed.
That's what they call it.
What's that? We call it Comstock Creek, but in the wetland buffer, they have it unnamed tributary. So that was one of the things that we were asking, at least for that little strip, to be considered. So we want like the creek to be named after, the Comstocks, because it's their farm. And then there's like so that when I'm negotiating or talking to developers about is I'd like a jogging trail or something because I talked to the neighbors. So I flew out there in September. And my husband has been going there for years with his dad. They're the ones who built the barbed wire fence around it. So our kids have gone there blackberry picking with them over the years. Dave and Dick Backlund maintained the property for years. but it's, so basically to create some type of jogging trail or something, because one of the neighbors had talked about, he likes to run his dogs there. Like he had torn down part of the fence. Instead of yelling at him about it, we asked them, well, what would make it nicer for the surrounding neighbors, right? And then the president of the Meadowbrook HOA had talked about that when they did the development over there, that they had promised them a jogging trail. So that's one of the criteria that we're putting in there, that we want to make it so that it's something nice for the community of St. Helens. And it's going to be something that when people think of the Comstock name and they think of our family and the history there, that it's a way to give back, for lack of a better way to say it, that they'll have fond memories of my husband's dad and his grandmother and grandfather and siblings, because he was the last of the three. So Aunt Joanne owned the strip to the immediate left, and then Uncle Doug was to the right. And unfortunately, he was the last to pass with that one.
Has the developer said anything about what if the property is half R10 and half R7?
We haven't talked about if it was half R10 and half R7. Most of it, when they're looking at for a community, they were looking at like if based on the housing products that they can do across the entire community for consistency, so that we could get more green space, like we talked about, like with some of the jogging trails, and to make a nicer community that's more upscale but not up cost, if that makes sense, was the key one. And so R7 was the one that really seemed to fit with what they could do, that would keep it within a price range that people could afford, but then would also keep it within a standard that it would flow with the communities next door. And, like, so basically Meadowbrook and other ones, like if you look at the ones, ironically, when people talk about the different zoning, if you look at the white farmhouse on Pittsburgh Road, that was the one that was built by my husband's great grandfather in 1923, Grandpa Martin. And so the reason why they're bigger lots is because Aunt Joanne sold off first. So it was easier so they chunked it up in bigger lots. And the reason why, if you look at the one to even the right of that, Uncle Doug had developed his own house there, right? So a lot of that was, it was smaller pieces. So they didn't fulfill Grandma Sarah's dream. And that was a big deal for our dad, was because it wasn't what she wanted, right? And I had attached to the letter even the picture of where they had divided the three out and what they thought that they were going to do with it. And at the time, it was going to be quarter-acre lots. So the R7 is closer to that vision as well, right? Of looking at so that it's a community that is affordable for the people in St. Helens, so that, for example, their children or their parents, or say like if, an older parent like us, I have a 27-year-old, a 22-year-old, I also have twins that are 7, but we started over, same husband. It's just one of those, when you think you're done and all of a sudden you're not. But with that piece, it's, that they could have that ability they could upscale the parents, but then it would give them more options. Or if they wanted to have where their children could buy in the same community, then they could have more families clustered together, right? Because that was ultimately one of his dreams to develop it, was to try and get the whole family there. But it just, unfortunately, it didn't work out.
Thanks very much for the history.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is Commissioner Carey. I just wanted to tell you there's actually a state agency of geographical names that you can apply to have that creek named Comstock officially.
Could you send me that? That would be amazing. Actually, I'm sorry to ask.
It's pretty obscure. I'll have to dig that up. But
Okay.
We actually have a local example, the North Fork of McNulty Creek, I think, that happened here. I don't know. I'd have that where I can find it somewhere.
That would be awesome, because he's talked about, like, when he was a little boy, he used to make forts there, him and his brother and his sister. And then when he would bring his kids, my husband and his, up there, and they would make, they would go blackberry picking along the creek. So even when we had the blackberry bushes removed to do the wetland delineation, I cried, because I was just like, I hope they grow back. I know it sounds kind of silly, because I know blackberries are everywhere in Oregon, right? but it's more of, those are the things that we think about when we think about him, as the lingonberry taffy, the blackberry bushes, and what they, because it was a farm, right? So that was, anyway, so that would be great. Thank you.
So much.
All right, thanks, Jeannie. You'll have an opportunity to rebut if anyone speaks, so be ready.
Okay, stand by.
Okay, absolutely.
All right.
Is there anyone who would like to speak in favor of the application, either in person?
Well, I'll talk.
So we're gonna do in favor, neutral, and opposition. So,
Well, I'm gonna say in favor just because I know it's a given.
okay, yeah,
but I do have.
come on up. Please state your name for the record.
Okay, Vicki Knust, NJUST. And just so you people know why I'm interested, I am at the corner of Westboro Way where it's gonna open up. My piece of property is, I guess I would call that the south of the R7. The one that butts up to the end of Westboro Way, that will open up. And it's that little piece. Okay, so you were asking about, just real quick, you were asking about the riparian area, or somebody was, and this weird line. It's because the BPA actually, the lines cross over the front of the property of the houses on the other side of the street from me. So it's not across the road, it's actually at the beginning of their property line. So it makes sense that that division in the Meadowbrook subdivision is R7. And was that R10 up above? Because that's the division, but they're further north than you think they are.
Clarify, are you the one with the long driveway on the, we're not clear where you're at?
Okay, I'm right here.
There's a big map
You
of,
can point to the screen.
Oh, okay, yeah. So my property's right here.
Okay.
Yeah, and see how that, actually the BPA goes right through here. So it's a little higher than you think. And then this whole area is a really deep ravine with a pretty good sized creek that really rages so it, it's got, and it cuts under the power lines. The creek does, and it's deep. It's it's probably why it's 75 feet. It's really its own little space. But I guess I love Jeannie's thing. I love her plan. I mean, R7, I've got this property and it's like 0.17 and it's definitely doable. It gives you a good sizable piece of property. I guess I wouldn't want to go more dense than that. I'm just thinking about the impact of the property that was built this year on the other side. This guy over here. All this.
yeah, Rich Bailey subdivision.
Yeah. And the majority of the people, except for this lot, no, let me see, this one, I think these ones, just these, all come here. And it's really impacted these people. So I know they're gonna get impacted a lot more. Clearly, I don't get it yet, but I will, I'm sure. And so if it was this, it makes a lot more sense than this for that. The wetlands are pretty expensive. That's why these lots are so big. Because it's pretty wet here. So it would be just kind of going like this, I think. But hopefully this is happening. What you guys talked about with access here, because I really want to see it go over the wetlands. So I guess I'm for it, because I have to be, but I don't really want to see this property go, but I get it. I guess that's it for now.
All right.
It's a beautiful piece of property, you guys. It really is.
Jeannie, you listening?
Thanks very much.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm gonna ask Cindy Furseth to.
I'm Cindy Furseth. I'm the president of Meadowbrook HOA. And so I've dealt with everybody in the group for some time. And I've been in contact with Jeannie. And at one point in time, my dad, who originally built in Meadowbrook, was in touch with Jim Comstock and Dick Backlund. So I kind of know what the history is, but I would say that from a Meadowbrook perspective, we have a lot of areas that people have either misunderstandings about, and I've been doing this for over 20 years, so it's not like it's unfamiliar to me. We have maintained the properties, we have maintained the access easements. Jeannie contacted me sometime last year, and I mean, we've even talked about, could you get through on Willie Lane? I found today's conversation about the fire trucks not being able to turn around on Willie interesting, because I've got the corner house, so I'm lucky, but I can still see where it would be an issue. I think that for the betterment of everyone, I know that when the initial development on the other side of Meadowbrook went in, and it was duplexes and all of that, and there aren't a lot of streets and people can't turn around and there's nowhere to park, it was not well done. And I see this as a project that is very well done, very well planned out, it's thought out, and a lot of consideration has been given to the people that live in the existing community. And I can see connecting the two and it being beneficial to everyone. We do maintain the BPA easement. We maintain the open space down towards the creek at the bottom of, it's on Bar before Roberts. And we maintain the easement that is right next to those 3 houses that are in there that are not part of Meadowbrook, but one of the original engineers had a house in there. So there was a lot of little weird carving out that went on at the time, but I still see where that is a reasonable from both that side and the other side. Is it a reasonable access to be able to utilize the space and benefit everyone? And if we can benefit everybody, I think we're all doing the right thing. So if you have questions, that's basically why I'm on the call. But I would say from everyone I have spoken to in Meadowbrook, and we've had a couple of issues in the last year where we put some effort into contacting the owners, who wants to do what, who doesn't want to. And granted, Meadowbrook is a small development by comparison to a lot, but it's also a very well contained and nicely done small group. It's 82 houses. It's very nice. So if anybody has any questions, I'm here to answer those, but I am definitely in support of doing this because I think it's the right thing. I think it's the way of the world. We're going to have, well, let's face it, Bar Avenue has more traffic on it than anybody ever thought it was going to, and things are going to change. But if we can control to some extent that they change for the better, I think we should. So that's it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see anyone else in favor of in Zoom. I believe Rhonda is in opposition. Is there anyone in Zoom who wants to speak in neutral testimony? I'm not seeing anybody that messaged me. Okay, I think we're moving on to opposition. Oh, Autumn. Autumn, did you want to speak as neutral? Okay, I'm going to ask to unmute you. If you want to start your video, you can.
No, I'll just leave it off.
Great.
So my name is Autumn Oliver, and my mom, sorry, I'm really emotional about this because my mom lives on 34815 West Girl Way in an orange house, and Rich, I call him Rich Dick Bailey, he built a subdivision over on her other side, and it has caused so much impact on her corner of that street. I mean, I have 2 kids, 3 and 4, and the amount of people that have zoomed up and around that road, not stopping at stop signs, not paying attention to children. I mean, so many close calls that have happened over just the amount of houses that have gone in is tremendously heartbreaking. I was born and raised in this town, and to see what it has done to some of the people packing up and moving, like, so I'm kind of neutral to it because I don't want to see what happened on the other side go to that land. I mean, really pay attention to what you're doing and who you're bringing in and what's being built. Because like the emotional toll it's taking on people, it's insane. And a lot of people are afraid to speak up because they get turned down. But you know, I think enough is enough, and some people just really need to be considerate of everybody that lives in this community and around there and how long they've been in there and how long they've been a part of this town. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say.
And your mother's on Westboro Way?
Yeah, she lives in the Orange House, it's 34815 Westboro Way, and she has been such an advocate for people surrounding that neighborhood. She has talked to people who are afraid to speak up. She has gone to the city. She has, I mean, this woman has defended herself against so many people. I mean, she's worked and lived in this town for years, and it's just, yes, it's completely absurd what happened on that other side of that road. I mean, it's incredibly heartbreaking, because this is not the town that a lot of us knew.
It's all due to the traffic going on the road.
Oh, the traffic is absolutely 25 miles an hour up Westboro Way is way too fast. I mean, you ask anybody that lives on that road, it is just, it's like speeding. It's like a racetrack. And there's no respect for children or people walking the streets anymore. And the concrete, the pavement is cracked. My mother's driveway is cracked because of all the heavy machinery that's come in. And people just throw their hands up, and it's like, oh, well, but these are people's homes. This is their property. This is, you know, these are where they've raised their children. So that was all I wanted to say.
Okay, appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Other neutral testimony. So Rhonda Kirtland would like to speak as neutral. Let me get you unmuted. You should be able to.
Hello. Can
If
you hear
want
me?
We can, yep.
I am currently in tax lot 3201. So our home is one of the carved out homes that are off of the long driveway on the off of the easement off of Bar Avenue. Our home is the one that kind of flanks the acreage. And so we are kind of set in to the property in an odd way. Our back door is actually technically the side of our house. And I have to say, I want to give my condolences to Jeannie. I'm sorry for your loss, and I really appreciate the wonderful testimony that you presented. It made me feel a lot better because I was feeling like Amber. I got the letter in the mail and I opened it, you know, for the annexation. I opened it on Christmas. And the next day, you know, it snowed, and, you know, every morning, every day for the last 10 years, I've looked out on that very special property. And I really, it just broke my heart because I was thinking that it was going to be like what Amber had explained, you know, that horrendous neighborhood that they put in. And so, you know, it's a wetland. There's a deer family that's been out there for who knows how long. She always has her babies. They go to the water, they bed down over there. There were pheasants. I mean, it's just beaming with life out there. And so I really appreciated Jeannie saying that they want to, you know, retain that part of the property because it is a very special place. And in this area, there really isn't, you know, there's, what is it? There's like the big open field that you can take your dogs to. And then there's just Campbell Park. There really isn't any place you can go that's green space here. You know, everything's just being cut, and there's random weird, you know, driveways and houses being put everywhere. And so I know I would want to speak to the next topic, which is the transportation, because we are on the easement property. And I know that that is the spot where you can get into the southern part of this property. That's probably a later discussion, but I would like to hear more about the plans for that. Just knowing that I drive that every day, and when I turn to come down my driveway, it's a blind corner. You have to be really careful, especially with the house in the corner with the fence. Now you can't even see cars coming down, and most people speed down Bar because they're coming downhill, and they're just slowing down finally when they get to the stop sign. But you can't have a lot of people waiting to turn left right there because it just, it backs up. But one of the other things I just wanted to mention is that I'm really excited to hear more about the property. I would definitely want it to be an R7. I don't feel like the road and putting that public road right there would accommodate very many homes in that area. There is, when it rains quite a bit, the property at the very far southern corner, that does tend to flood up a little bit, but I'm sure you guys will assess that. And I know that Jeannie had said that lots of people have approached them about buying little bits and pieces, and I know that we didn't contact personally, but we, were talking to our neighbor across the field, and we always wanted to just get enough of the area to purchase, because we use a little bit of it to grow a garden, and I'm just concerned that the developer might, just put in a house that's right next to us. I mean, we're what is it, 6 to 8 feet off of the side of your house is our property line. So I just wanted to have that as an opportunity to discuss about any opportunities for that. I think that's all I've got.
Great, thank you very much.
Thanks, Rhonda. There is someone who's got a phone number, so I just want to say this out loud. If there's anyone who wants to speak in neutral or in opposition, please let me know. I know it's hard if you're on the phone only because you don't have chat. Did we miss anybody? Is there anyone else who would like to give testimony tonight? Otherwise, we're going to circle back to Jeannie to rebut any of this testimony. Oh, Abby. Let me unmute you, Abby. Abby, could you state your name for the record, first and last name, please?
Certainly. My name is can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My name is Abigail Dawson, and Dawson is Dawson. And I live over off of Mountain View Drive. I am the third house off of Sykes that my property backs up to the property in question. And I'm somewhat neutral, leaning more towards opposition on this project, mostly because of the impact to the wetlands, to the wildlife that is there. I know that one of the previous residents had mentioned the deer and the quail. I do know that there's a lot of frogs, there's a lot of birds and a lot of other wildlife that uses that property as their homes. And so I am concerned about the impact on the ecosystems of the wetlands in the area, especially down towards that lower field, but really in the entire property. So I just wanted to bring that up. I also wanted to say that new subdivision that the Bailey developer has put in at the end of Westboro, because Mountain View is the cul-de-sac that comes up towards that, and people have to use Mountain View to get in there. I will reiterate what I believe her name was Autumn was saying, that there are people who do come zooming up the hill, zooming down the hill, no regard for the fact that there are small children that play basketball in the street, or that are people that are walking their dogs, things of that nature. So I would reiterate what Autumn was saying is, please be really, really careful who you bring in to do this, if it's going to go through, because part of the reason that I bought the house I'm in is because it was a cul-de-sac, because there wasn't supposed to be a whole lot of traffic. And that has not held true. And because of that big development up at the end of Westboro. So I just wanted to kind of let you folks know that, this is something that is going to have a lot of impact on the people in the entire area. And, I'm not super thrilled with the idea. I do understand the housing crisis. I do understand the need for more homes. I am sad to see the property potentially not being open to the animals that have lived there and like that. So that's about all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thanks, Abby. Would anyone else like to testify in opposition? I'm not seeing anything in chat. This is kind of the last call for testimony. Okay, I will open that up to Jeannie. Jeannie.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, and we can see you.
Can you hear me? Okay, good. So a few things. So for Autumn and Abigail and Rhonda, I hear your concerns, you know, loud and clear, and they were actually some of the concerns of, frankly, why it's taken so long for our dad to decide, you know, okay, when is the time, right? And because he was going to develop it himself, and for years, this was his pet project forever. So that is why, as a family, frankly, even though we've gotten some offers that are literally hundreds of thousands more from, you know, national builders that have been interested in the property, like he's gotten tons of offers over the last 20 years. I've gotten a file full of offers over the last 10. We turned them down, actually, because we felt like not a single one of them, and this was the difference, and the ones that we're leaning towards, were the ones that actually went in and bothered to talk to the neighbors. So I told them the neighbors that we were talking to, folks like Cindy, you know, or talking to people in the town like the mayor, so Rick Scholes, or, you know, Jacob and Jenny and others that our dad had spoken to as well, because one of the key things for us as a family is to make sure that this is something that's good for St. Helens, because that town meant a lot to our family, especially to our dad and his mom and our aunt and uncle, and they're gone, right? So this is their legacy, and we don't want their legacy to be people upset because of zooming cars or things like that. Now, whether or not it was to be developed, it was always in the plans actually since the 1980s to be developed. So if you purchase your properties and you weren't aware of that, that's why they originally zoned it residential from farmland previously. I'm sorry for that one. Like that's kind of, you know, like I would go back and talk to whomever you bought the homes from that piece. Like, but I will tell you, as a family, what is important for our family is to make sure that the developer that is chosen is one that we partner very closely with. And the one that I'm frankly really leaning towards, or we have been leaning towards, he actually has gone in and he's talked to different members of the community. He's talked to everyone that we've asked him to. There's been 2 that have done that out of the 6 offers that we've gotten. And those are the only 2 that we're still talking to, right? Because it's important for us that they've actually walked the property, that they understand what it means to the residents of St. Helens, so that when you guys think of the Comstock name or the Martin name, when you think of our family, you think of what they contributed to the town and not what they took from it, and not your kids got hit. And when you talk about small children, I have twins that are 7. So my husband and I, so part of the delay, we not only have had 4 biological children of our own, but because I was a foster kid growing up, we've had 14, 12 foster and 2 exchange children. So children are very important to us. And that was a really critical aspect too of whatever's being developed. We wanted it to, that's why we're asking for our 7 to make it within reach, so that the family could stay together, right? That they could, and that it's a good place that people think about. Not from the youngest to the oldest, because at the end of the day, the land will out-survive all of us. But what matters most is your family and your legacy, and leaving the world a better place than when you came, right? For lack of a better way to say that, for everybody, right? And if I think of the gamut of where our family is, in that sense. So I do hope that helps. I mean, obviously, I am not a developer. This is brand new. In fact, I took a sabbatical. If you Google my name, I'm one of the top 5 experts in the world for cloud computing. In fact, people think I'm crazy because I just got a Lifetime Achievement Award from Stanford for starting digital transformation, and I took a sabbatical off for this project. So kind of put everything on hold because because our dad was dying and our family was more important than anything else. And then this making sure that his dream comes to fruition and that our mom is taken care of is my top priority. And then I can go back to career or whatever the case may be, right? So I don't know if that helps to answer your question. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for the compassion that you're doing with the property. It's commendable that people think about the city rather than just the land. So do we have any other questions?
Yes, this is Commissioner Carey. I don't know if you can see in the chat, Jeannie, but I put it in there, the Oregon Geographic Names Board. So if you look that up, Oregon Geographic Names Board,
Okay.
you can get directions on how to submit a name for a creek.
So I see.
Oh, that's awesome.
And the opportunity for testimony is done. Cindy, if you are wanting to speak on the next agenda item, that would be up for Jacob to decide. But for now, the public hearing portion of this process is over. So Russ will guide us through the next stuff as the chair. Sorry, Cindy.
Okay, we didn't have any other questions. Okay.
I have some.
I think so. Hearing no further questions, the commission and no further responses from staff, the public record is closed and this matter is returned to the table for deliberations and oral decisions. All right.
This is a recommendation to council.
Yes.
I have another question though.
Yep.
So I'm coming back to so if it's more than 12 acres, we have to make some kind of special finding in order to annex it. Did I misunderstand that? I'm just trying to return to that.
Yeah, and the staff report came up with that finding. So
Okay.
we feel like there's a need for both housing at city density level and transportation improvements that warrant a finding there.
Right.
So we felt comfortable with that finding as is. If you want to add more, as Jacob
And it's 10 acres,
noted,
I thought.
yeah, it's greater than 10, but
It's greater than 10.
that's what the criteria
And
is.
so 46,000, 47,000, 48,000 square feet per acre.
43,560.
43,560. So it looks like there's 158,000, looks like there's 150,000 square feet that's entitled an unencumbered area.
Mhm.
And so what does that mean, unencumbered area? If we approve this, what does that mean that we annex this and it's on this map as an unencumbered area? Does that mean it's set aside for?
Buildable.
Yeah, we're talking about gross and net.
Right. And I'm
And
trying to figure out the riparian, if we can set aside the riparian because it's not going to be developable.
Would it put us under that 10-acre threshold? Is that
Correct.
kind of what you're saying? Yeah.
Right, because I'm thinking that have we before annexed 10 acres based upon the state guidelines of emergency housing or have we done that before, after we've reached our threshold? We've reached our threshold. So if I'm just wondering about if we've previously said we're gonna annex more than 10 acres and we've used the state statements before as a reason, because we have two reasons. One is the state reasons, right? And staff has found that to be true. The other is transportation reasons, correct?
Yeah, the problem is this criteria is very vague. You could take it a lot of different directions, like what we're discussing about taking out undevelopable. I mean, sure, I could add this into the report to bolster that finding. We've never annexed a property over 10 acres that is zoned residential in the last 12 years. So this is the first time we're seeing it in recent history.
so if it was done in the past, it wasn't done in the context of having an adopted housing needs analysis.
Right.
Having the housing situation that we're in, which is like, oh, this is kind of looking like California. So it's a whole
Interesting take, though.
new world. But like I said before, the more findings you add, the more strength it has. And if one of your findings is, well, the net acreage is less than 10, No reason you couldn't do that.
Yeah.
Well, the reason is that I don't think it sets, we get to speak our personal opinions as commissioners at this point in the.
Yeah, this is,
Deliberation.
Okay, so I'm concerned that if the commission accepts the state, you know, the staff has come up with this recommendation. But if we accept as a precedent that the state, you know, we've got this housing need, and we accept that as one of the reasons why we're gonna accept 10 acres plus, I think it sets the wrong precedent, and we don't need to, because we have a transportation need that this fills, number one. Number two, also, I don't even know if it's necessary, because what I've heard from the testimony here is the importance of maintaining the riparian features of this parcel in a significant portion of the parcel, both parcels being maintained for wildlife. Deer are there. It's a large creek where where people run through, people look out at it. They find peace and serenity from seeing the open space. And that's something that I think I would ask or request or somehow make a finding that because of the set aside, the promise set aside for riparian, that number one, the council should be encouraged to maintain that throughout the process. And number two, this is just me throwing stuff out there as part of deliberations. We may not need to make a finding, but if we do make a finding, it should only be on the transportation issues and not because the state has this finding and therefore we're going to annex 10 acres. I think that's a dangerous precedent that we don't want to do.
I'm confused, Steve, are you deliberating in opposition of the annexation?
No, I'm for the annexation.
Okay.
For the annexation,
Reasoning.
but I'm against, I'm against the idea.
Is that housing stuff still applies to goal 10. And so we could move that discussion into housing. I still think we would have to make findings around the statewide goal for housing, which includes density and type of housing. And clearly there's a statewide need. But I could add findings in there about net acreage. And we have a wetland delineation to help us do that. So I think that makes sense to me. But I do still think that section is relevant just to the
I think
housing.
it is. I'm
just
just
to the
not sure if
housing
that should
section.
be
Yep,
a basis.
yeah.
For, I think it's relevant for sure, but it doesn't need to be one of our bases for accepting the action.
I don't know if you have thoughts there, Jacob.
Jenny?
Yeah.
Jenny,
Yes.
can you, with the major strip of property on either side of the actual creek, can a park be placed in that riparian area? That's 75 feet wide.
Yeah, that's a good
As
question.
long as you don't interfere with, say, the edges of the creek, you can maintain it.
okay,
Really,
75-foot buffer, the 50-foot buffer, these are mandated requirements of our code. They've been in effect since December of 2003. So that's something that's gonna have to be considered for development of the property. So and it can be enjoyed, you don't just put barbed wire fence around it and say you can't go in it at all. So if it's if it functions like a nature park, sure.
well,
Yeah,
or
sure.
even have benches or whatever put in it, but just basically a quote park area, not a developed park. You know, with kids play toys and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
So just a natural.
But if you make it a park, who's gonna maintain it?
Huh?
And we gotta focus on the fact, this is an annexation.
Yeah.
This is not a subdivision.
That's right.
It's not a development, it's not a conditional use permit. This is simply an annexation. Do we take this property in and what do we zone it?
Oh,
Yeah.
I just wanted to know whether you actually could do a natural park
Yes,
on
yes,
a piece of.
that is something that's conceivable.
And that would come when the developer steps forward.
That's a- Yeah,
proposal.
that's up to develop.
Right, well, yeah, exactly.
We're dealing with 3 parcels, correct? Because of the.
We're dealing with two
lots.
properties.
No, I know, but no, take a look at, you've got the area with the creek cutting this
Yeah.
into thirds.
Yeah, it's probably because of the way the land lays and where the wetlands are at, that you're gonna have 3 pockets.
Right, you can't drive across with a road or anything like that.
There's 3 pockets.
So it's gonna be 3 pockets. The uppermost pocket is now what is that one?
It's a budding R10.
The budding the R10, well, that's the R7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Budding, so.
I would prefer to see the northernmost portion at an R10 and the mid and lower at R7.
So this is part of the,
Is this the reason?
Have the whole thing R7.
R7.
They're gonna come back to us with variances and everything else. This seems like an arbitrary line that somebody created it.
That's right. And as far as development, they're giving up so much property already.
Right.
That there's tons of open space that you normally not have on a parcel
Right.
like this. So an R7 seems logical that could happen and it'd be done pretty well because there'll be a lot of open space.
I think there's
Yeah.
no conversation about R5 or
No,
residential, it's not even on the table.
R7.
R7 is. right.
And I agree with that too, because like you said, these chunks are taken out, and so the developable spaces are these smaller pockets. And so the R7 this whole 11 acres is not going to be developed in one big gigantic development because it's going to be broken into small pieces. So R7 would give more lots for the developer, but in smaller chunks. So it won't feel like a big development. And it won't input all of that development down the same street.
Right. I think we have to take a hard look when it comes around to it about access to the different properties. But that's not for tonight.
No, that's not tonight. Were you wanting a motion on the whole piece with the findings?
So I'm hearing consensus around R7.
Right.
So
Yes.
R7 wasn't the recommendation, so we need to hear that in your motion.
I understand that.
And this is a recommendation to council, so you're
Right.
not approving it.
I understand.
And then if you would like to incorporate Commissioner Tosky's recommendation around the wetland findings within criteria E, that's something for consideration. I took note of it. If the commission kind of followed what we were talking about, I followed it. So if you want to follow that, you can do that in your motion, add a finding about that.
I personally don't see the big deal about it.
Ask the riparian guy.
Trying to shrink I'm trying to shrink it, but maybe it won't, maybe it doesn't work. Trying to make sure that we fit our findings outside of the state guidelines. And one of the reasons is we've got this large chunk that's gonna be right there, and it's not gonna get developed. And Jenny seems to think that will eventually suffice. And the other is the traffic mitigation. Otherwise, we have to use the state housing mandates we would have to
Demonstrate our need.
we have to demonstrate our need.
But not that part of
We're
this
not
parcel
going, we're
doesn't.
not going there, so we're not going to R5.
No, we're not going down there.
Right.
Oh, I think
Down that road.
he's referring to I can understand why there's confusion around this. It seems esoteric when I try to explain it. But it's a specifically addressing one of the criterion about demonstrating need. It's in our code, we have to demonstrate need because it's greater than 10 acres. And he's saying we should just take out the undevelopable portion and that can be our demonstration of need. It's under 10 acres.
But haven't we already demonstrated need?
Yeah, that's what I thought.
We don't have to. That's the point. We can annex this without
Steve's trying to get it
demonstrating
down
need.
to
That's the
9.9
thing that I'm
acres.
trying to avoid.
Jennifer, what do you mean when you say that? Like, that we've already demonstrated need?
I thought that we had already met other points of the criteria with housing needs and different things and so I thought we already demonstrated.
I see. You're using other sections to kind of prove that point. Yeah. I think it's a very, we're getting down a very weird findings road that's not really necessary.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think we're going a little.
Complicated.
Well, I
I
don't-
think it's complicating.
Yeah, I agree.
But we don't have to do it.
Yeah.
Don't we need just a, where do you want the finding at it though?
It's in criteria E.
We don't have to
Page
have
12.
states.
Yeah.
That's the thing, in order to annex this property.
No,
And we don't have to include it either. We don't have to include it. We can say, we think that satisfies transportation needs.
I see why we don't have to conclude it, but I don't know where the dangerous precedent comes in.
Well, I'm just, what if the next time somebody comes along with a 11-acre, 12-acre parcel we don't want to annex? And then, I don't know if this is precedential or not, I don't know.
Yeah, I would say most of the time people come for an annexation, denial isn't really an option. So I think it's a rare scenario that you're coming up with.
Sorry,
we're
that's
not
what I get
dividing
for being
it
a new guy.
into it's sorry, this is all one.
No, it's one motion. So if you want to make it, Audrey.
Well,
It's just.
the recommendation. Vote on an annexation, having it zoned R7. You want the finding, Steve?
That's up to you. That's up to.
Your finding,
Yeah, I want the finding.
Steve wants his finding.
Esoteric finding in there.
Esoteric, you've got to use that word.
So the finding,
Keep him copacetic.
and that's emphasizing transportation and net.
Net acreage.
Correct. Yes,
And I'm okay with that.
thank you.
So do we have a second
Thanks for
from
throwing-
you, Dan?
What?
Was that a second?
No, I was just okay with taking that finding out.
Dan, if you're not first, what are you?
I could be a second.
Thank you.
All right. Made and seconded. All right, all in favor of,
Aye.
okay, opposed? Not hearing any. All right.
This will be the city council for anybody watching. This is a recommendation to the city council. The city council will get this at a future hearing. And they'll consider testimony then and this recommendation by the planning commission.
February 16th is the city council decision on this matter.
February 16th, huh? Be there, keep it R7. That's yours.
All right, and we have the right-of-way dedication for property between 2600 Pittsburgh Road and Bar Avenue. I think we might have.
Okay, so same property. As we explore this,
Let me have to share screen with everybody, so just a second.
technology caught up. So this is a discussion with the planning commission and the recommendation, and it's not an everyday thing that we've talked about, and so I just kind of want to see how the planning commission thinks before we bring it to the council or consider it further at the staff level. So
You're on my screen here. Stop. Yeah.
it's anti-intuitive.
Mhm.
Okay,
Tell me about it.
so here's the property. As we've discussed in the last hearing, we kind of have three pockets. the southerly pocket is down here. You have these protected wetlands in between these two pockets. And so the question is, all right, what do we do about access to this most southerly pocket? And if we look at the overall, we can see that Bar Avenue is close. In fact, the property touches Bar Avenue, but at a point. And if we were only two-dimensional creatures, well, that point would probably work. However, we are not two-dimensional creatures, we are three-dimensional, so we need more than just a point. And there's a couple ways to bring Bar Avenue to the property. They can explore a lot line adjustment where this property here, which is owned by the Meadowbrook Homeowners Association. It's an open space tract, although it also has utility and access easement here for little grouping of houses. So either a lot line adjustment to bring the property to Bar Avenue, or what we're talking about tonight is the potential of dedicating the right of way in advance of the subdivision. So usually when we have a subdivision, we're taking a piece of property and we're carving it up into lots. The right of way dedication happens with that process. But in this case, we have this other piece that's outside of that. And so thinking about this, all right, well, we could consider dedicating the right of way in advance. And here are just some maps showing that. So first of all, let's look at that area more closely. So this is the open space tract. And so the Comstock property here is there. So that little point where it abuts Bar is right here. So a lot of this green space tract is this access and utility easement. And we're talking about right-of-way dedication that would kind of be in this area. So what's a right-of-way? Well, a right-of-way is somewhere where a lot of times you have access and utilities. And so if it's taking up an access to utility easement, well, there's not really a change. Those properties still maintain that access. And here is, sorry, that property a little differently, showing the aerial photo. You can see the easement shown with that diagonal pattern. And then down here, we have the cross hatching. That would be the suggested dedicated area, which isn't terribly large. I should note the Meadowbrook plan development, it's one of our older plan developments based on standards from another time where they needed some minimum open space. And the nice thing about this is it doesn't impact the open space at all because it's all just driveway and utilities now. Here's a closer view. In addition to vehicles, we also have to consider utilities. And we have this manhole here. And this is a structure that can conceivably be a point where a sewer line is branched off of. And usually when we talk about easements, we want 7.5 feet from the center of the line. In this case, we're just suggesting 10. It gives a little extra buffer room, and there's no apparent foul for doing that. Yeah, so the area here is about 1,500 square feet. No, that's not what I'm talking about. So it's a little unusual to think about the dedication in advance. Oh, the other thing I want to mention, it's kind of the sweet spot between Sykes Road to the south and Ruby Court. And this is very important. When I was thinking about this, because we have to think about our street access standards. And one of those is that between streets, we have 150 feet.
And that's measured from the center. And it just so happens between Ruby Court here and Sykes, there's about 330 feet. And so this happens to be more or less equidistant between those, and so it meets our spacing standard as well. So it meets the sweet spot for this, spacing standard. It doesn't mess up the Meadowbrook open space. It's already providing access and utility area now, and it's in a logical location for access for the portion of that southern pocket of the Comstock property. And because it was kind of unusual, we wanted to have a conversation with the planning commission on how you felt about dedicating the right of way in advance. And this distance, north-south, would be wider than a typical right of way. A standard public right of way providing access to that portion of the property would either be 40 or 50 feet in wide. And this is a little wider, but you do have cases where, like on a corner, the right of way may have a bulge in it. That's what we call an eyebrow, to provide better access for lots in the corner. And it would kind of be just a little oversized right of way, which would kind of function as one of those. There are some things in there that would have to be relocated, like the mailboxes. Streetlights are, those are in the public right of way anyways. And then there's some utility boxes over here. But it seems like a sacrificial area for the purpose of providing access. And so, does this freak you out? Do you think it's reasonable? Do you even know what I'm talking about? I wanted to have this discussion with the commission to help guide us on this.
Is Bar Avenue wide enough at that spot to have a turn lane for making that left hand? If you put a road in there.
That's a good question, but the other question is a turning lane warranted?
Quite a bit of traffic up and down Bar Avenue.
Well, think about it, just the lower portion.
I did a quick calculation, and with streets and so forth, you might get 7 or 8 houses in there.
I just said.
It's a little tiny parcel.
So our normal local street has 2 travel lanes and then on-street parking. I think if you sacrifice on-street parking for an area, you might be able to squeeze a turning lane in there. But that would be the type of thing that we would see with the traffic analysis for a subdivision, whether or not they felt that there was an actual functional deficiency with the street.
This is Meadowbrook property, you're coming right through. Is it needed to HOA or?
Yeah, so
Gonna condemn it, or how does?
the other thing I should mention is that we've had discussions with the Meadowbrook president, homeowners association president, who is open to the idea. We didn't just go in here, well, I think they'll like it. So there has been discussion with them. So they're open to it, and they're aware that, all right, well, let's explore this. And if it ends up that the city is uncomfortable allowing the right-of-way dedication at this juncture, they can still explore the lot line adjustment, and that would be between them and the Meadowbrook Homeowners Association.
So this function is really up to them.
Yeah, ultimately, it's up to Meadowbrook and the city council. City council has to accept the right-of-way dedication. Because this is a little unusual, I felt, well, this is a good thing for the planning commission to chew on, so that if we get to the council, we can at least say, okay, we have explored this with our planning commission, here's their recommendation. We're not just throwing this out you without considering it.
This will set the landowner and Meadowbrook together, and they'll have to decide that it makes it a lot easier.
So Jake,
It's done, so when a subdivision comes in, the right of way is already there and they can.
so Jacob, there is no other access to the southern chunk of property, right? Or even possible access?
No, really,
Yeah.
it's the most practical physical location, from what we can tell. Because there's no other right of way close. The other option would be from Westboro Way and, going over that wetland, which would take extra permitting and, just add more traffic to, Westboro and Mountain View. So the other good thing is if access is from Bar, it helps even the load a little bit from the surrounding street network. So each street network doesn't bear the full burden of the subdivision.
So this isn't a public hearing. I don't know if you wanted to open it up.
I think it's fair, because at the beginning, we asked people if they want to speak about something not on the agenda. It is fair, I think, to allow people to provide testimony. It's not a public hearing, and so it can be a little bit more informal, but I think the planning commission, I would assume you'd want to hear what people have to say. So unless you have any questions for me.
This tiny parcel that's held by the homeowners association, was that for a monument or what? If it's right on the corner of where we're talking about on Bar, it's little tiny. Just a little.
I don't know what that strip is. I don't see it on the plat. I think it's just some assessor thing.
No.
It's not an actual separate lot or parcel.
I think we can be concerned with.
On the partition plat, it's shown, it might be right of way there.
Didn't know if it was originally meant for a monument or something and it never put it in.
No.
So Jeannie, if you want to speak now, I think you're unmuted.
Okay, so one thing to note is that there is already an easement for the Comstock property for that area today, and it's been in place since 2006. So that was when we discussed it. So Cindy, the president of the HOA, and I have already been in discussions and about, okay, how do we make that easement permanent, if that makes sense? Because the way that it was written years ago was kind of odd in that it was for the lifetime of our parents. So Mama-san or Chieko is still alive, so it's still valid, right? But it's not typical of an easement written that way. So that's when we had asked the city council what they thought, because we're in agreement that based on US constitutional laws, denying us access to the property would be a big deal, regardless of whether we build on it or not, right? Not having access to our land to be able to maintain it also is a fire hazard for the houses along the backside. That's why there is an easement there for the benefit of not just our family, but also Meadowbrook, so that if there is a fire or if there is an emergency, that there's a way that you could get to those, the backside of the houses, especially because there used to be alfalfa and hay grown on the property, so the grass can get, really tall there. So something to consider. And I think Cindy's still on. So what we had asked is we asked Jacob, because you guys are the experts, not us, I'm not a developer from any stretch of the imagination, of what would be the recommendation from the city of St. Helens of a way that we could make that permanent. And then that's why we were asking for the R7-2, to Dan's point, because the maximum amount of lots would be 7 or 8. And really what we're looking at is probably going to be around that number. So at least it gives, so it's not a huge traffic or a huge amount of homes or traffic coming in and out, but it actually opens that area up for not just for the residents that are going to live there, but for health and safety reasons for the backside of the homes that are adjacent to the property on the lower third portion. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Cindy, you should be unmuted if you'd like to provide more testimony here.
I was just going to say that from the beginning, we have realized that property is landlocked, and that granted, there are a few houses back in there, but they would still have access. I don't know that there would be that much more traffic. And Meadowbrook has offered in the past to provide for, you know, those little green people with the flags. We've had a few stolen, but we've provided those. We've offered to put in speed bumps, things like that, that will slow down the traffic in that area. But I think for an access road to go through there would be more of a benefit than a detriment to anybody that was in there. And we could, you know, working together, make arrangements for there to be a fire lane and to be a turnaround and all those things that prior to tonight, I might not have previously thought about. So I'm more than willing to work with whoever I need to work with to make it happen.
And just so the commission, as a reminder, Cindy is the HOA president for Meadowbrook.
Right.
You can figure that out, but if you haven't.
Jeannie, in the developer you're talking to, are they talking about some type of trail access in that easement also from that position? Because that would be a good location.
Well, and that's what we're open to any and all feedback. So I have them silent on the phone. That's court form. So I told them not to speak tonight, but to listen, because the key was that for us is that it's taking into account, you know, city, community, the people of the area. So what are some of the challenges or things that we're going to have to think about, right? And so I wanted him in listen mode, not speak mode, if that makes sense. But I do think, like, from a trail perspective, you know, that was the idea state, right? That it would be a logical connection point so that people can have access to the backside. Because the vision is more of like, how do we take Meadowbrook, because Meadowbrook, that was one of the things that my father-in-law was very adamant about. I remember when they did the easement in 2006 for lots of different reasons. I used to fly back and forth every week for 20 years, actually. So, you know, talking about some of these pieces, so he's very thankful to that community. So that was part of the idea of having that jogging trail after talking to Cindy of what they needed. So we would want some type of connectivity so that they can access it, right? And then everyone's worried about the wetlands. That's part of the reason why we did the wetland delineation study, to see what we could and could not do there. Like, I actually asked for a part 2, but found out from the wetland expert that the local, like the state and government agency laws won't let you put like a park there, but you could put the jogging trail, right? So we've had to tailor back some of the vision that we'd like to see there. But it would open it up for access for other people that want to enjoy the wetlands too. That was part of the idea when Cindy and I were talking about this. That's why we're trying to do it before we like get into platting and dividing and everything else, so that we know exactly what we're working with, and then we can work with the developer to come up with something that is going to be a nice community, but it's going to benefit the whole community, not just the one division.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to get at what the development is going to be, just that it would be your desire to maintain that access for the public, for pedestrians, not just vehicular. That's all I was asking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry if I over.
No, it's really interesting. But
I apologize. If we're talking cloud technology, I could talk a mean streak, but I get nervous because this is my very first planning commission meeting. So I apologize if, and I don't want to screw it up, because I will hear about it from my mom for the rest of our lives, right? From that perspective.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Okay, so.
Well, we're testimony on this matter. So we've heard from some people. The question is if there's anybody else who would like to talk to the planning commission about this. Now's your chance. And it could be in favor, neutral, opposed. It's not a formal public hearing, so just whoever wants to speak next.
Ready for the floor?
Do I have to go up just because I'm here?
Oh, I mean,
I can see you, right?
see you on the,
Oh, they can't?
yeah, if you come up, they can
Okay.
see you, not, yeah,
I'm Vicky. So I've been looking at that because I thought, where do they expect to be able to access this little lower spot? And I thought, when I looked at it, I thought, well, that would be a place if they can get it. Only one concern. I think that this is the best spot, but there is, like everybody has said, there's a lot of bar traffic. And if it's about 150 feet, you said, to that manhole, and that might be where the road would go pop through about halfway to,
From sites, yeah.
yeah, yeah. There's sometimes like 3-4 cars backed up waiting to get onto sites there. So if it was further back than that, that would be good, but they may not be able to get out. Is the only concern. I probably shouldn't say this because I want it to go in there and not through Westboro Way. But it seems like there'd be room if it's that far up, is what I was thinking. So to me, that seems like the best option.
That's a good question. That's a good question, Jacob. Is that enough queuing distance?
I'm sorry, what was the question, Dan?
Is that enough queuing distance to Sykes?
Queuing, I love it.
Well, it meets our standard. If we consider that a parallel space is 22 feet in depth or length, excuse me, and 4 cars would be 88 feet,
Should be okay then.
and that's 4, and we're still, you know, we're a little over half to the 150. So just based on that, just the basic math, it seems like, at least based on the testimony about what kind of backup, not a study that we have.
I drive that a lot, so you've got, most people are going left, I'm going right.
So it's expert anecdotal
There you go.
testimony.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
They haven't turn lane there? Right away?
Is there enough to have a turn lane there?
Yeah.
Well, that was a question before. Normal local street is 2 travel lanes and on-street parking. And on-street parking on a local street, if I remember right, is forecast at 7 feet wide. So you take that out, that gives you 14 feet of surplus. And that's enough for a suicide
So
lane.
that street is already built out to its.
The road section is built out, yeah.
Okay.
It's servicing 7 or 8 houses.
That is the assumption of that pocket, that it's
Yeah.
gonna be a smaller number, yes.
Right, so the Sykes to Far Avenue, everybody knows is a shortcut.
Yeah.
So it's a
Mhm.
very busy street. It is a busy street. I'm guilty of it. I've been out. So maybe that just slow people down a little bit if they have another stop sign to pay attention to. It makes sense to me. I'm in favor of it.
So if there's anybody else who would like to talk out there in Zoom land.
Yeah, Rhonda felt like she stated her concerns about the traffic concerns in her previous testimony, which, we're all considering now, so that's fair. I'm not seeing anybody else aside from that comment.
And it makes sense for Rhonda, she's right there, so anybody would expect her to have those concerns, because anybody who had a home there would have them, so that's understandable.
All right, what do we do with this?
Well, so you can say, why did you give this to us? We don't want to make a decision. I'm hoping that you'd be nicer and you give us some guidance. This isn't something you're mandated to do. But like I said, as we explore this and if we do give it to the council, ideally we'd have some feedback and recommendation from the commission.
How can you get a piece of property that hasn't been negotiated yet?
Yeah, I would think it'd have to be a public hearing. Where they
Is
could
that
say,
any right of way?
Well, you've still got Meadowbrook, you've got to deal with them to be able to make this happen, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
and so that is correct. So we have positive testimony from the president. Now, the president does not represent the entire association. So we would need a legal description. The association would have to sign off. But if some of these preliminary thoughts are creating roadblocks, well, there's no point in them exploring that issue.
That's the only roadblock I see, and that could be put in however we decide. Process has to go through, just like you talked about.
Yeah, the homeowners association will have to sign off on that dedication deed. So if the association, the majority of the association says, hell no, we won't go, then we will not have a document to present to the council for acceptance, and they'll have to explore something different. But kind of my intent is to figure out where we are here, and then maybe have a preliminary discussion with the council. I haven't figured out entirely in my head yet, because this is unusual. But the first step was getting your feedback.
You want a recommendation for the possibility?
Yes. Are we going down a road that seems logical? Or do you think we're burying ourselves in a cooling pond?
Problem with, I mean, if they get denied, then they've got to go to court to be able to force them to give it to.
I don't know if it forces anybody
No, I
to do
know.
anything. I think the idea, just generally speaking, is another access road, even for 8 houses, is a good idea.
Oh, yeah, no, I think it's a great idea. As far as,
If you're looking.
That's all you need.
that's all you need?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, we're
And I
just
think that's a-
presenting an idea, I think.
I was getting too far ahead in the process, knowing that
Yeah.
real estate, but it's a great idea, so.
And I think that's exactly the kind of thing that as I've been hearing you say, you want to be proposing to the council. You know, so looking ahead at these things and bringing it to the council's attentions. So I think this is exactly in line with that.
Propose that they explore the
I think it's
options.
in general, the wind's blowing in favor of dedication, so the HOA and the Comstock folks can get together and then we're gonna probably make a road.
So the planning commission, I'm not getting frowny faces from the commission.
No, it's a
essentially.
matter of what you
I
want.
mean, I'm doing agreement.
Your
That would be
feedback is
the-
another tool that council can look at and when they make their formal decision on it.
And so is anybody frowny faced over this concept? It's basically what I want to know.
Everybody smile.
On the contrary, it's.
Okay, and Dan, I saw him smile, so,
Wow.
all right, thank you.
All right.
Got my fancy teeth then so I can smile.
Okay, Dan.
Oh,
All right, thanks everyone on Zoom land. I think we're moving down the agenda.
Discussion items is next, annual summary report. Hope you guys haven't had a very busy year.
So my only comment is I have lamented on how much work has not been so fun for a few year period. And it's reflected here. You look at the numbers, 17, 18, 19, 20. And I look at that and yeah, I remember that. That wasn't very fun.
Having fun yet?
And we're finally back to a more average number. And I've already lost a lot of my hair, but that's okay.
Yeah, but that was from previous years.
Yeah, I know. Come on, hey, you're letting it, trying to make a funny joke, you're owning it.
We're growing a lot of city, well, the annexations.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, that's the big one.
Yeah, the annexations, this was definitely a huge year of annexations. Well, it'll probably result in more permits down the road.
Every month. we're getting-
Not enough historic site reviews.
No.
More of those.
A lot of signs. Sign permits, that's a good business aspect, that business is coming back.
Yeah. The temporary use permits haven't ticked up yet. 'Cause those are, a lot of those are for events like fireworks stands and stuff, and a lot of that got canceled. So
Yeah.
they haven't kicked back up.
So I'm thankful for these numbers because of the big projects we have going on, like the public safety facility, the riverfront project, the St. Helens Industrial Park. It was really frustrating just dealing with the growth, dealing with the processing, and then having to put some bandwidth on these other projects. So I'm thankful for these numbers, because I noticed in the last several months being able to be more engaged in those projects, just to try to help shepherd them along to, shepherd them to success. So
This doesn't chart us where these numbers come from in the year. Did they all happen all at once, or were they sprinkled through the year?
Yeah, and it's hard, because I mean, for me, the beginning of the year was like my own, okay, when was I most uncomfortable? Which, that's not a very technical thing, but at the beginning of this year, there was two things going on at the same time that were very time consuming. There was the appeal for Belton Road, and that was just something that kept going and going and going. And then there was code amendments. That was pretty huge thing to tackle. So I know there was other things going on, and somehow we got through those. When did they come into the year? I know it felt like the latter part of this year, it was like, wow, it's been a while since it felt like this, but it's actually kind of the holiday wall. So I think they're more, if I was just gonna guess, more the first half rather than the second.
What you can't see in these numbers is like the appeals. That was a lot of work for one.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, the numbers, a sign permit, which could be done half drunk and blindfolded, is a number. But whereas a conditional use permit for a 239 unit apartment complex is also one number. So that's a very good point, Dan. Those individual numbers aren't weighted. So this is an imperfect matrix or metric for busyness, but nothing.
For time.
Yeah.
I'm the one who does signs.
I know, but I'm saying, with your permission.
Oh,
we
I
have
see.
to-
No, sometimes sign permits can be complex. I don't want it to say they're all like that, but.
You're backpedaling.
Well, I don't want to bore you with the normal manner of speak, so I try to keep it entertaining.
Okay. Hey, Dan, will you want to be chair again?
That's the next subject matter.
I read it.
It's been a year already.
You want a motion on that, Brad?
And vice.
Yeah, if you're willing to make it.
Jennifer, would you like to be vice, or would you like to be chair?
I would like to be neither.
I'm okay with being chair, if that's what you vote.
I'm in favor of Dan being chair
Yeah,
again.
I'm in favor, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, your chair.
You got it.
Vice.
Chair.
You in
Okay.
favor of being vice again?
I'll do it again. But as long as you don't call me up very often, I'll do it again.
All
All
right,
in
you're
favor?
gonna leave his wife? Well.
Aye.
All in favor?
Okay.
Aye.
Okay. All right. Here again. All right, planning director decisions. They were emailed to us. Any questions on those?
Some of those signs.
I have signs for Popeye.
I know, I was having really a good time.
But I would say Popeyes, they've been good to work with. They have a good team.
Yeah.
That they're on it. You deal with a variety of consultants, and the Popeyes people, they've been good.
That must be such a challenging site to build on. You see that? huh?
Oh,
It's like
yeah.
a little.
Yes.
It's amazing that the traffic impact analysis doesn't, if Portland, but if you go up TV Highway or any of these places, and all those franchises, they're dumping cars on like crazy. Actually, 30 Mina. You down the road.
Isn't fast food the highest as far as turnover in the
But it's
traffic?
all right
around
around
here? Yeah,
so.
it's one of the highest.
Yeah, they gave us a pretty good chunk and change towards the
Yes, you too.
Gable US 30 intersection.
I know.
Yay.
My house.
Distracted.
You can't go to your kids.
Okay,
It's 4 miles to your house, the other way it's only 2.
activity report.
So if there's any questions about anything in the last report, this is a time to ask, just that's for Mr. Tosky's benefit. And one thing of interest in there is updating our GIS and mapping data. This is something that we've been talking about for years. And in fact, my notes, when we really started getting serious about it, was in 2016 or so. And you know, you look at these numbers and you can see what happened after 16, things just got really busy. So we didn't have time to think about it much. And then finally, well, now's a good time. So we're working on the contract. We're hoping to do the flyover in March or April. I can't remember which one, but it's the optimum time where you don't have leaves and you have good sun angle. So we'll get some nice, very high resolution aerial imagery. The ones we've been using internally have been from 2009. And you know, those kept us going for a while. And having the Great Recession and the lull in development activity for several years kind of added life to our older data, but those days are gone. We have 2 positions in our engineering department that we're going to be interviewing very soon for, and we don't want to have new people come in. Okay, well, if you look at this data, you got to remember these things that happened over the course of many years, and then look at Google Earth to do comparison. You know, that's not fair. For us who've been here a while, it's easy, but for someone new to look at, that would be horrible. So these new people are going to have nice, fresh data. We're going to have nice, fresh data, which is just going to help us all. And another thing, for your benefit, we've been talking about having a nice, big laminated aerial photo up there. We've been holding off on that until we got something new. And we're finally going to be able to have that, which I hope you don't use as a dartboard. See, you got to keep it entertaining, right?
That's the way they tact.
You're not talking about, you're not talking about portrait of you up there, are you?
No.
Okay,
not for me.
all right.
The
No
city of
dartboard then.
Helens does not have much of the aerial view of St. Helens does not have a striking resemblance to my face, fortunately, so.
What are the parameters of outside? What's the picture?
Oh, no, that's a great question. So historically, we've been focused within our city limits. This is the first time that we're going beyond that to our urban growth boundary. We know we have to plan for our urban growth boundary, and there's areas where we want to get utilities out to, so let's just capture it all. That way we have that into the future. The other thing about timing is this isn't developed yet. So we wanted to get, and the St. Helens Industrial Business Park, that stuff hasn't started. So we wanted to get some good before imagery, so that the timing just works out really good for that. So that's something that some of us here with the city are really excited about, who use it all the time. As it relates to the planning commission, like the annexation maps, you know, that's all using pretty old data. So you're gonna have some neater slides and maps. And we'll have some 3-dimensional terrain stuff to work with too, which we hadn't had before.
You can do elevations with that?
LiDAR.
Yeah, LiDAR based.
Nice.
stuff.
That'd be great.
So,
So you can see the addition I put up without a permit?
It's gonna help with enforcement.
Yeah,
That's a great
yeah,
point.
we, as part of this, we have,
When you go in for a permit, they go, well, that's not on.
we do use aerial imagery to determine past compliance, yeah. Yeah, we do, yeah.
You're all gonna get the drone certificate, so you can fly drones.
Well, the pilot's license for, yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask a procedural question about the annexation tonight so we've been overturned by the city council before.
Yes.
What, if they disagree with R7 or what's the potential there?
Well, can I, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that maybe we should make a finding. I think we should discuss whether R5 is even appropriate or any other more dense housing is appropriate. We should make some findings in that regard as well.
Too late now,
It's
but,
too late?
oh yeah, deliberations are closed, decisions made.
Yeah, I just was curious what the can they come back and go, no, we don't like that you guys have said R7, we wanted R5, or we wanted R10?
Well, okay, they can't go R5 and AR without someone doing a transportation analysis that shows that the potential density greater than R7 will not compromise the transportation systems, and if it does, they have to mitigate for that. And the reason for that is when you do transportation planning, you look at your zoning and you make future density, future growth assumptions based on that zoning. So when you start increasing the dial of density, that's why there's that transportation planning rule that has to re-look at that, even though sometimes it's kind of stupid, but that's what we have to deal with. So without that expert data in the file, which we don't have, R5 and AR is off the table. Yeah, we can't check the box. So when it gets to the city council, the potential disagreement would be R7 is too dense, we want R10. I'm not gonna, so if they were gonna, but they do have the option to disagree.
The difference in those other cases too, if you're referencing last decisions, is you had the applicant coming with a land use attorney and who did all of the analysis around housing affordability. So they were advocating for a higher density. In this case, you have an applicant who wants R7. So, council's gonna hear that too. Yeah, that's a big distinction.
And
I think what was really significant was just her testimony about the legacy they want to leave behind for the family, but not just to be in the past, but what they're hoping to contribute to the future of St. Helens. And I found that very compelling and thoughtful, and in terms of what they want to develop. So I couldn't see any reason.
Yeah, I just didn't know if, let's say, there's testimony to the fact that we need more affordable housing. It's not really affordable housing question even there.
Yeah.
It's not
This
affordable
is-
housing in the terms of.
And didn't you say in the analysis that, that when early in the hearing that we didn't have that?
Yeah, no,
Much of a-
previous annexation hearings or zoning amendment decisions, we didn't have an HNA.
Right.
We didn't have that document that we're using as our guide. So we were going in the dark a little bit.
Right, but with now that we have that document, it's not that this annex or this land and this annexation is vital to meeting the analysis, so that I couldn't see why we would want to, well, as you said, we can't go to R5 or R7, but
He's the counselor.
well, yeah, but you know what happened last time. And I'm not saying, but I see no reason
If you
that
don't,
you're,
which is the developer or the person wanting to do it.
Yeah,
Makes sense,
right.
but you never know.
I think if the city council said we want our R9 to be, or 10 rather, to be this bigger space. If you think of this with all this open spaces as like a plan unit development, it'll kind of look like that with a big chunk of open space and little pockets of a little more concentrated housing. So I don't think it's going to feel like an R7 when it's all said and done.
Right, Jacob's just gotta sell it.
sold to me.
So he's got one, so.
Well, I looked this morning and through RMLS, which is a realtor multiple listing system at Greystone, the lowest priced home in there that's still active is 433. And in Oak Ridge, the lowest is 530,
Wow.
like 246 a square foot.
Yeah, and those are 4,000 square foot lots.
Those are smaller. Yeah.
And attached,
And they're attached, yeah.
attached, most of them are attached to the hip to the neighbor, so.
So it's not an affordability question, I think, it's just not.
Nope.
But to Jeannie's point, she did make this, she said in R10, that's a bigger lot. It's going to be more expensive than an R7. And that, so there
So
is
it's a-
some question there, you know, that she's.
For billionaires instead of millionaires.
Right. They're both expensive, but R10 is certainly gonna be more. So even if it was an affordability question, I think it would go in line with your R7.
Mhm. It's more, it's
Yeah.
accessible to a greater percentage of the population,
That's a fair state, yeah.
although it may be a
Still out of reach.
segment that
For a
is,
lot, yeah.
Because they're supposed to raise the interest rate 3 times this year.
Yeah, put brakes on everything.
We're gonna get interest.
Okay, at this time, I would like to give the floor to Steve.
Okay, thank you. There's been, I'll just talk about myself and when I talked about the Renaissance and the city going through a Renaissance, and I want to talk about the riverfront development as being something that's going to define the city of St. Helens for as long as we're all going to be alive, certainly a generation after that. And that I'm suggesting that we as a planning commission request from the city, and not that it's been denied to us, first of all, the city's been doing a great job with the project. Plans are wonderful. The urban development approval is a very powerful and important tool to provide the financing that is really going to help our city achieve the goals, the lofty goals that it's made for itself, and the goals that our citizens deserve to achieve. And so I'm thinking that we should request modestly at this time, not anything radical, but modestly that we have a city, that a planning commissioner be involved in urban development, meaning just there, either at the budget committees or actually when urban development is discussed, that a planning commissioner be involved with planning for riverfront development, meaning planning commissioner is assigned to go to the meetings, listen to the meetings, report back to the planning commission. And planning that we as a planning commission start working with or taking upon ourselves, looking at the architectural standards for high housing in the riverfront development. And so I just wanted to throw those three things out for general discussion. And there was another thing that I thought about is that there's some discussion about changing of the ordinances concerning the structure of the city docks, meaning how are we going to enforce the rules regarding the usage of the city docks? And that may be something that planning commission, that we want to have a planning commissioner involved in. And the idea is essentially the planning commissioner is participating in urban development as it moves forward, and then can come back to the planning commission and say, I went to the urban development meetings, this is what's happening in urban development, and then we're kept abreast of things as they're going. And the idea is to be a little more keeping up with the fast pace of the changes that are being made and the important changes so that we can help city council and as best we can to achieve the goals that are common to all of us. And that's to make sure that we have the best development for all of the citizens of the city of St. Helens. And then when it's done, we're gonna look at it and say, this is great. This has been a really positive thing for the city. So and I think that if we have the time to help. And that's another thing, we should do so. We should make some resolutions that we that out for discussion.
I definitely think we should be more involved with talking about it than access it, basically, but I think, you know, look at the paper, most I can, I'd like to hear more discussion when beneficial to the process too. Planning commission should be. It's gonna, a lot of it's gonna come before it's built out, so more involved. We should take the time. These offer to put in a few hours. So.
I don't know, does anybody else have any, I mean, there's a lot of things in our duties under planning commission, conducting studies, not to say that we're gonna do that, but consulting and advising with the public agencies on ways to carry out the comprehensive plan. That's one of our duties. One of our powers of the 18 enumerated. And you know, with the development agent, the development, urban development being formed, you know, it's $42 million in money. And there's
Urban
Urban Renewal Agency, thank you. Urban Renewal Agency. And it's a very powerful tool. Rachel presented, and I really think that not only should all planners, but I think that all citizens of St. Helens should go into that January 5th meeting and look at the presentation on the urban renewal. It's going to be a very important tool for the city to get done with and see it done. So I'm going to make some resolutions unless people want to have some additional comments or questions.
One comment is this stuff you see here, there was an ad hoc committee and we did ask for planning commission representation on that. And Commissioner Carey was part of that.
He's pointing to the Riverwalk design. You can't see him
On the-
pointing to the renderings, but they're in the council chambers, Dan.
All right, thanks.
And that's been a common way where there's a separate plan, like if we're updating a transportation systems plan or something like that. You know, we usually get some representation from the planning commission on those subcommittees. So that doesn't have to be the only way, but that has been a traditional way.
Right, it's all, I mean, it's all, as Steve was mentioning, in the duties that you can perform, numbers 12 and 13 certainly gives a lot of specific things about recommending and making suggestions to the city council on a number of things, laying out widening, extending parking, location, streets, sidewalks, boulevards, structures, future growth, development, beautification. So I think that if you as a commission wanted to focus on something, take the initiative, focus on something that you would specifically have an interest in, you know, to have at it. In dialogue with the council. I would welcome that personally, especially as we get closer to filling in between the Riverwalk and the Bluff. That's going to be huge, and I think that the planning commission is a natural and necessary part of being involved in that discussion as we look at having a master, if I hope I get it right, the master developer. And those types of things. So
is there you know, just to facilitate the discussion, are there next steps being taken like right now that if the planning commission wanted to be involved, that we could say, yes, can we be on the agenda for these meetings? Can we be part of this committee and have one of us just go there and you know, like, oh yeah, we're working on this right now, we're working on this, I don't know what's being worked on, and I'm sorry, you know, I'm new, so, and these are questions that I'm asking, just so that we could just say, yes, we'd like to be involved in certain things that are happening right now.
I don't know, Jay,
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned three, the urban renewal agency,
Right.
the riverfront redevelopment, and then the docks. And I think there was an ad hoc, I don't know much about the docks
there's
part.
an ad hoc thing going on about the docks.
So, and I don't know if there's way to add membership to that, but certainly,
Talk to the mayor,
yeah, so that.
he's kind of
I
leading.
think all of those require a recommendation that then Counselor Berkeley would take to council as hit the liaison, because it's ultimately a council decision on membership of the things that, you know, council created. So council is the urban renewal agency. I think that's the proper medium for this, but correct me if I'm wrong. I think that's the right approach.
Urban Renewal Agency, is that the name of what?
That's the body that meets to discuss funds related to the urban renewal agency.
Who's it made up of now?
City council.
So, right, which is what it is, I mean, that's how it was established, but it doesn't have to stay that way. I mean, there can be some consideration to the change, but at this point in time, since I think we're early on in just getting it started, we're just bringing in this tax incremental funding. We're not at a phase where we're actually talking about specific projects. I mean, there is a list in that urban renewal plan, a list of possible projects in a general sense. But then as we get into the specifics, we need to have a lot more discussion and talking. And I don't know, does it make sense to have the Urban Renewal Agency Board expanded, or not just to include the city council? There's benefit to having more representation voice. So I'm saying right now, this is what we walked into. I don't know that it has to, the Urban Renewal Agency has to continue in the form that it continues.
What a great opportunity, right? That you have more people that want to be involved.
Well,
Instead of
so-
out there looking for volunteers and nobody steps up, then we have, I mean, I've said this before, I said it in the joint meeting that I'm surprised that we don't have any work sessions. I think Russ has said before that I'm surprised that we're just reactionary to applications. That doesn't, planning commission seems like it's.
So I think you can, if you choose to do that, if you want to increase, have a work session or study session beyond these meetings, I believe that's within the, possible. That if you have these duties, that you can't perform these things, I believe you need to be provided with the opportunities and resources to do that. Now, that would mean, calling upon staff to provide that support, and how do we use Jenny's and Christina's and Jacob's time and city time. But it is something that we can I think should definitely be looked at, discussed. It's something worth your discussion about if that's something you want to do.
I don't think we're asking anything more of them, we're just to be
Well, if
involved.
we have extra meetings, whatever.
Yeah,
Extra
he was
meetings.
mentioning work sessions, which, that requires staffing and who's coming up with
Well,
the
it's like-
agenda and.
With this scenario of, I mean, I've been, I don't know, has it been a year? I guess it has been a year, maybe it has been a year. I don't know, Steve. And just all of us trying to get together and come up with not an agenda, but, goals and what we'd like to see and how we can impact the city. To me, it seems like that we can't do that unless we had some kind of official public meeting work session.
You'd have, I think you have to.
Facilitate that we can set some goals, because maybe all of us sitting here don't want to have any more responsibility than we already have.
That's
So, well,
We
maybe
know
it's,
as we,
within an ad hoc, I don't know, the city council appointing an ad hoc committee of a number of planning commission, those of you who wish to, so you don't form a quorum, but it's a ad hoc committee, I don't know. I mean, I think there's possibilities, it's to discuss it. There's ability
That we could, we could say there's an extra meeting per month, and then say one day time.
Yeah.
And show up as a working meeting, and then show up and do the job, and if we have a quorum, we have a quorum, and if we don't, we don't. But there, we can set a meeting.
You might want to make sure you check, you'd have to check with Kathy, Kathy, you'll make sure about, well, those in terms of like notification.
Well, yeah, there's a whole bunch of things in here. We would have to notify, we would have to, it would have to be open for the public, and I think that just some of the things some of the frustration, I think, that I hear around town when I talk to people is, number one, I think they really want the process to keep moving, and so do I. That I think this river development is something that we really need to try to achieve. And having the planning commission involved, I think, as the process goes forward, is going to help potentially public input and to alleviate public concerns. That if we have meetings where things are being discussed, like, for example, architectural standards on the housing, you know, what are the priorities for the urban renewal agency? How are we going to get this money moving so that we can start building? These are things the public can show up and hopefully express support for, but if not concerns for, we can hear their concerns and make the public feel more involved in the process as well.
Here's something. So 2 years ago, we started this strategic plan process, it's a biannual strategic plan. And that's where we group all these tasks. Okay, well, this is our bucket list of stuff to do in near, mid, and long term. And some of those are things like architectural standards for residential areas, something the planning commission has discussed before. So we kind of put that in a matrix where we think it can be done. If it's something that can be done soon, it's in a near term, you know, so on and so forth. That's something that staff works on, the council works on. Strategic planning on tasks, that's probably the first thing the planning commission can have input on is strategic planning. What is the city as a whole gonna do? Because that's where we talk about, okay, staffing and stuff like that. Do you create a recreation department when the police is understaffed, other departments are understaffed, and yet that's taken from the general fund? These are these broader questions that we have to ask ourselves when we consider how everybody's functioning as a city. When Public Works wants to start a transportation systems plan, we have to consider that in our strategic plan. Okay, well, I guess we won't work on residential stuff because this is going, we have to put attention to this. So thus strategic planning, something's happening over there, you want something over here, okay, where do we go? Strategic planning. So I think that's the first step, is being involved in that, and we're in the middle of it, so it's timely.
It's good.
That's my opinion.
And just being involved, where would we go to be? I think the two things that have come up in an urban renewal agency and riverfront development, would that help us be involved in strategic planning, as you say?
Well, the strategic plan is broader.
It's an actual document that gets prepared every 2 years and is on the city's website. It's being updated right now.
Yeah.
So I think
Okay.
being involved in that creation of that document is what he's referring
Okay.
to.
All right.
And that's where, in fact, isn't tomorrow your team?
Retreat.
That's a retreat, yeah, so that's. I don't know how deep you're gonna get in the strategic plan then, but it's early in this second cycle, and so,
The retreat,
He has to be
another,
involved, that's.
like the meeting that you had with Michael Sykes, is that?
similar but
Or
not,
There's a retreat to hear.
similar but not focused, no, the previous one was at the,
I don't know when the last one was. It's more general. The one with Michael Sykes was focusing on this is more general. So it is open to the public, although it's not a time we're not taking public comment. But
You're not like going to a lodge or somewhere. or
no,
retreat.
oh, no, it's happening.
You're all getting together and having.
No, oh, no.
Pints.
We are not going to Skamania and, and no, it's here, we will be fed. We'll be eating on the taxpayer dollar, but no, it's like here, yeah. Why it's called a retreat, I don't know, because we're not, heading off.
The Urban Renewal Agency can have advisory members added.
Well,
It's just a point I wanted to make, and I think the council, you can also just attend them. And there's always visitor comments during that. For right now, I think that's a good mechanism, but urban renewal meetings happen once a year typically. So I don't think you're gonna see another urban renewal agency meeting until January 2023. I don't know how useful that would be. Just a thought about the other recommendations.
Now, it's not a bad time to discuss, because eventually it will be more active, there'll be a lot of money.
Yeah.
We're just at the very early stages of the urban renewal district. And in several years, there's gonna be a lot of money and a lot more activity.
but because we're gonna use the urban renewal money to help leverage other funding sources. And once we get phase one done on the walk and we put the street through, I believe that's gonna be drawing the attraction of investors to come. I think there's probably, we didn't have that many except Tokala, 4 years ago, because we weren't, as a city, weren't doing anything in terms of infrastructure and development. And now that it's going to actually be seen that we're putting things in, I think will be more attractive. And I think I did my part. On Sunday, we went to Astoria to Bowie Beer, my daughter, wife, and I. And as I was checking out, I left my card, asked them to pass it on to the owner. I said if they're ever looking to expand their, footprint, we're developing our waterfront. So I think that's the kind of thing is happening. So I do believe that is really, this is the time, even though things concretely aren't happening now, it's going to be happening soon. And if the planning commission wants to get in on it, I think it's the time to start.
Right, that's exactly, I think, where the discussion's headed, and that is, I think we wanna discuss being more involved, but we're not sure where to get more involved and how we can get more involved. And that's exactly the idea, is that as we move forward with the building of this thing, that we start getting involved now so that we can help guide the city and guide decisions about priorities and other items that may come up. That's the point. And so, but I'm not sure what to ask for. That's the problem.
Maybe we start with a work session.
I agree with you.
Yeah, let's start with a work session. Get out the proper notices, and then we can make sure Patrick's available and everybody that needs to be available, and figure out what we want to do, where we go.
Sure. Sounds good. I mean, because I was gonna say, okay, we want a resolution that, one of us is able to be on whatever sort of planning is involved for the riverfront development. That'd be a very vague thing. We would resolve that, we would vote on it. Then it would go to the council and say, the planning commission has resolved that they want to have somebody, be involved in the riverfront development. Maybe that's not specific enough. We want to be deeply involved, would be a better way to put it. But that's very general. So perhaps we could say we're resolving to have a work session that to try to figure out how we can become more involved. And how we can help and how we can assist. That may be I'm just throwing that out there. Because it's already late. We can start early and start talking about it and get some more feedback, and people then can prepare and think about where are we on moving forward on the riverfront. riverfront breaking ground. When do we project that we're gonna start actually building structures? What are the first structures that are we're thinking about building, and why? Those kinds of questions.
And I don't know if we know that until we see what kind of partnerships we have out there. We have our plans. We have our plans which have been vetted and adopted by the planning commission. But some of those are tough to answer.
Well, those are gonna be the kinds of questions that people are gonna wanna ask anyway, and I think that we can be more involved in that, and I think we should be more involved in it, because we all have the common goal, that's for sure.
And I think we need a session with the city council to find out how we can help them with what they have going on and where they really need our expertise.
We did that once.
To help them.
We didn't get much response from city council.
No.
Yeah.
We've already.
So
that may be
that's
something.
It just mended wounds. It mended wounds.
Did it mend wounds?
No, I thought so. Maybe I'm wrong. That's where if you wanted to be more productive, I think if you, maybe you had your planning agenda or whatever, or to talk about specifically, then that, and you want to say, you want to talk to the council, that it is maybe not as broad as it was or in general, but on some specific direction that you want to go and how it works with council. I think I support that.
So what we need to do is figure out a date for a work session.
Yeah,
And
let's do
get
that.
Kathy Payne to approve
And
it.
then one other thing is, this work session coming up, I'd like for us to invite the Main Street Alliance to come and talk to us, if they will.
That would
Work
work,
session.
yeah.
Because there was a presentation that Councilor Topola mentioned that Main Street had done, and that he had mentioned it, I think in December at the council meeting, and thought it was very helpful to hear the concerns about the businesses in St. Helens, and I think that hearing from the Main Street Alliance, their viewpoint on where the city is and how the city can move forward to help the businesses is something that would be good for us to hear. And I think it would also help us in our mission to aid the city in doing the things that we're here to do. So I would ask that not only do we come up with a meeting, we say we want one working session meeting, and it doesn't have to start at 7, it could start earlier, a little bit earlier in my mind. No, Councilor Berkeley, I don't know, but I don't know, it could start a little earlier. But then I'd ask that the Main Street Alliance come. We'd invite them, they don't have to come, but it's not like a subpoena, we're just requesting, please. So I will do this. I will propose that the Planning Commission have a working session meeting to discuss further with the Planning Department about how the Planning Commission can become more involved in aiding the city council and aiding the city and the citizens of the city in various areas. In particular, our first focus will be on the riverfront development. And we should make a resolution that meeting should occur when? Don't know.
Tuesdays are good. Is that being we're all here on Tuesday? And where do we want to meet?
Meet here.
Running dog.
Running dogs.
Meet here.
Sunshine pizza. First city council meets is running dog.
Oh, really? Okay, well, we can go meet them there then. They meet in the dog. So are people, what do you think about it?
Yeah, I'm gonna agree.
So I guess we should have a date.
We should.
I'll resolve to come back at a certain date or working session, then see if we get, see where that goes.
Yeah, I think it would be good.
As long as we plan enough ahead, I can make it work.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what are the dates?
You want earlier, Jennifer?
It might be nice to do a little earlier, so we.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How early is too early?
Well, he's teaching, you teach school still, right? So what time?
I'm done at 4.
He's done at 4, so.
Another meeting, Patrick.
4:05.
Thank you.
It takes just about 5 minutes to get from my classroom to the council chambers.
As early as he could be available, I can make it work.
Yeah.
I mean, do you wanna make it as early as next week? I mean, we're rolling, why not? That's better for me, frankly, earlier in the month is better.
We've got stuff coming up.
The 18th isn't great for me, but what about the 19th?
So
Yeah, the 19th.
staffing for minutes, like our minutes required, those are all my questions, is an agenda.
And on the 19th.
Yeah, so we got
So-
we have union members.
So,
Well, it depends on where.
There's
So-
I'm associated with that.
Yeah.
There's council chamber.
so,
So.
so,
There's a lot
So-
of unanswered questions.
so in order,
Let's
Yeah.
figure this out.
in order to do it, that is gonna have to require, as we were saying, if you're meeting as of the planning commission. And then there are the staffing or whatever required, those are some things that'll have to be coordinated, worked out with Kathy, John, all that, because we do have union
I think
representation.
Yeah, I think what we want is to find the path of least resistance, right? Like, we don't want to staff this and have formal minutes and have a quorum, and like, that's what we're trying to avoid.
So,
And recording it and having publics online, and all public meetings are supposed to be hybrid, they're supposed to have Zoom now, so if it's an actual, there's a lot wrapped up in that.
I don't wanna run into a problem. I mean, I'd be happy if we could all have coffee together. I just.
Sure, right, but the quorum issue.
Yeah, so there's quorum issues, so how do we? do that right, is all my.
So-
Yeah. I mean, I think we know what you guys are aiming to do. I think you should let us research and figure out the best way to do it and come back to you with that. Yeah, to meet outside of a formal.
Knowing that what the sooner the better.
Well, I'm not sure if we can't, I read my little handbooks on, you guys gave a whole bunch
The
of.
public meetings law.
Yeah, and one of them, the public meetings law, and
Sure.
I think we have a quorum, like, so if 4 of us get together, which is technically a quorum, then I think there is a problem if we don't have a public, if we have it potentially, I don't know, but you provide guidance, but there was a thing I read on that was, if we get 4 together, that's a problem.
and I think that's right, and that's what we're saying, that if you organize that and there's a quorum, then the public meeting laws kick in. The question is, to what extent do we have to provide? I mean, do we have to have Christina or someone taking minutes? Is there a less formal, or a way that we can meet the requirements of the public meeting law without putting undue burden on our staff? That's kind of what I'm hearing too. Okay, so how can we, so you're suggesting that you might investigate how we can do that, so the commission can meet, and it can meet, but without putting. Meeting public meeting laws, without putting undue burden on staff.
Okay, I have another suggestion, so I didn't get second on my first one. About this, we resolve that we will ask staff, that the planning commission resolves that they'd like to engage in working meetings, we'd like to have another meeting a month to do that. And we'd like staff to provide us feedback at the next planning commission meeting, how we can accomplish that, when and how.
A second meeting every month?
Well, why not?
Well, the why not is it might be the potential.
Yeah, the why not,
We're asking.
yeah, so the why not, if we go back several years, we were dealing with committee overkill. And we're like, okay, this is causing some serious problems for us. We have to pull this back because we do not have the capacity for it. That's going to be an issue. I tell you right now, that is going to be an issue, capacity, yeah.
Okay.
So that I just,
Not yet, not every.
if we start having all these extra meetings, that will be an issue.
Okay then.
Yeah.
Is there a way to add to this, the already published meeting, like instead of 7 o'clock,
You need it like
6 to 7 is our work session? and
Council does work session.
Well, that's
Sure, I mean, you can, I guess.
then- and we're not adding a day.
We've done that before in our, when we have another planning effort, like a transportation systems plan, if you recall, we've had those prior to the normally scheduled meeting. So that would be something
That
that
sounds like
could
it's
be done.
It's
Why
probably
not?
the easiest way to do it.
Yeah, it's
Good for us too.
because we have to think efficient.
Right.
We have to think of it, that's just the reality of where we're at with the city. Unless you want to recommend the council start hiring people, but that becomes a whole other, because there's a lot of competition over which department, and it's,
Yeah.
So then why don't we, can we resolve that we're gonna, I mean, I'd like to resolve, maybe we just come early next time. How's this?
So, yeah, I mean, I think we would still want to involve the city
Still.
administrator in this
Yeah,
decision.
you'd still-
It's changing the structure. So every time, if that's the recommendation, like we need to talk about that.
I think there's a lot for us to do if we get involved. And if it's just like city council, they have the work session and they move right into that. So if we're in the same,
They usually have a full agenda and that agenda is prepared by staff, which takes time, right? So I guess who's preparing this agenda every month? Like
Yeah.
who's actually coming up with the content for an hour?
And bear in mind, you're adding to, sometimes can be very long regular meetings.
That's what I was gonna say, Dan.
We might go till 10:30 or 11 o'clock on a regular meeting, and then you add another hour to that, you're here for 6 hours. It gets pretty long. So you have to be careful of that. Sometimes we have very long meetings.
Maybe we add to it once a month, is only once a month.
or maybe it is ad hoc commit, I mean, another way is let's find out what it, but maybe it would be an ad hoc committee of
That's true.
3 strong, folks, 3 folks who are really involved.
We'll take the 3, so as long as.
Yes, I mean, I think that kind of thing can happen.
More people we can talk to.
I think that kind of thing can happen because we sometimes do that with the city council on some of these advisory things like for the Riverwalk. There can't be 3 of us at that, but we do, 1 or 2 of us take turns in there. So that is maybe another possibility, a way to do it that would not require the same degree of public conformance to public meeting law and requirement for staff support.
That sounds like a good idea. It sounds like more of a practical solution, because it sounds like we're trying to do something more formal. I mean, it sounds like, so maybe you want to do an ad hoc committee.
That brings it to the full planning commission
You report back.
at your meeting, report back at your meeting, and then.
Who wants to be on the ad hoc?
Oh, so I think it sounds like almost everyone's interested in being on it.
Maybe we could do, well, see, the thing is, we can't have a working meeting, we can't figure out, it's like, we need a meeting to figure out how we're gonna do the meetings. So, and we can't have a meeting without a public, agenda, so.
I think it's,
Welcome to the public.
I think it's something that we can chew on.
Yeah.
Now, we see the planning commission is interested in that kind of thing. I mean, some of the things, urban renewal, does the council want to have an advisory, planning commission advisor? That's pretty simple. And some of these other things like riverfront. There was, back when we created the framework plan, there was a lot of planning commission input, because we're creating the plan that once these things develop, the plan will be weighed against. Those are just 2 examples. But I think as long as we keep the dialogue going, I think something practical based on what
you see appropriate and whatever's going on. But like the dog stuff, yeah, that would be, I guess, just up to the mayor inviting a planning commissioner to be on that group.
Or a planning commissioner who's interested in participating in that, contacting him and saying, hey, I'd like to be involved in the discussion.
Right.
But that's beyond any of us here.
Right.
Such an enforcement function.
I mean, part of it, I think, is letting the process play out and knowing that you want more involvement, letting those opportunities arise organically, like the request for qualifications for the waterfront developer, like maybe that becomes an agenda item on your meeting, like maybe you review that if you wanted to, but I mean, I think ultimately council needs to advise staff on involving the commission. It's not a requirement that we engage the commission on that high level.
They have, but what I understanding of how the code in that too, is that they already have those duties and those ability to involve themselves in those things.
All we're doing is building.
So we can interpret it, but that's how I've seen that.
Yeah.
And that goes into strategic planning, you know, is part of the strategic plan, greater planning commission involvement. And where do you put your resources? I mean, there's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
In that.
I think some of the things that, I mean, I'm only speaking on a personal level here, so I think the idea is, this is me. I think that it would be great to get this project moving, and not to say that it isn't.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, I know it isn't, and I know it is. And so if the project's gonna move forward, so then what are the priorities? So let's just say we're building roads in the next, let's say we start building roads tomorrow. Let's just say tomorrow was the day we're building roads. You know, we're breaking ground, we're starting the river walk, we're breaking ground, when is ground gonna be broken? What is the timeline? And when are we gonna start building buildings? And what are the priorities for the city for the buildings that are gonna be built? And what are gonna be the layout? And those are things I think, you know, do we already know those things? I guess that'd be a question for me. And maybe, you know, I'm the new guy here, we don't, okay? And so those would be the things I think the planning commission want to be involved in early, like right away, just talk about, since we are moving forward with building, that the planning commission should be weighing in on what are our priorities as far as what we build in the city, and you know, what does get built and why, as far as structures and businesses and things like that, versus we are sitting here and then we get say, hey, look, here's the plan. What do you guys think of it? Versus us being involved in saying, we think these should be we recommend these are the priorities.
So I understand that, I believe I understand that there has already been a desire expressed by the planning commission, I also think by the council, to have another common meeting. Like we had. And I think if that would be a great opportunity to precisely ask, to state the exact, what you're saying or what the priorities are. And working it out at that common meeting with the council about how to move forward. But again, in a way that will, again, we're not overburdening staff, which is huge. I mean, it really is huge. But also providing you, the commission, to be more actively engaged in some way. And so maybe we should look at with the council, I'm not sure if we had talked about 3 months out or 6 months out, but let's look at that joint meeting again, but having it with more of a specific outcome in mind to determine what it is, the area where, what it is you want to be involved in and how.
Okay, and what do you guys think?
We need to give staff time to figure out what's most efficient. We're really gonna work with them. I kind of see there's value in us meeting first and then having the meeting with city council. But honestly, I was speaking freely, I would say the last meeting with city council was a waste of time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
You gotta eat.
yeah, you gotta eat.
Well, other than that,
It was a waste of time.
Okay,
And you know, we need some time to get down to the nitty gritty of it with you guys.
let's get down to the nitty gritty.
So maybe on the next time's agenda, then, we're gonna have another meeting for sure, and there's already, I don't know what's on the agenda. But, maybe we would continue this and then really have some very formal things to request. In the meantime, organically,
Well, I had a thought when you were describing, I mean, it sounds like you want to be involved in the scoring rubric that we use to score the different developments. So we get all these development proposals back after we go out to bid. How do we select the right one? We
Well-
go to our scoring rubric. We go to how, you know, what are they proposing? How do they meet our goals? How do they comply with all of our long range plans? How much money are they contributing to the public infrastructure? You know, all the things that we care about. And you want to be involved in the early stages of developing that scoring, is what I'm hearing. Is that a
I'd
fair?
like to see the plan for just that.
I think part of it is, I mean, I was part of the ad hoc committee, Russ was for the public safety facility, and Dan was part of the committee for the Riverwalk. There's no reporting back to the planning commission, so we already might have had all these answers to these questions, but there's been no time to report back of what, you know, Dan might be able to answer, you know, if he's gonna explain a lot to us that we don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It's just that you know, the appointed person has the opportunity to report to the commission.
And know that's gonna be the expectation, that you're gonna report back. That's part of your responsibility as being part of the ad hoc committee to report
Yeah,
back.
I think that's a great comment.
Does the planning rubric, does that involve you know, just the idea of what's the concept of how this land's gonna be developed and where, or, you know, what's gonna be the densities and just there's a lot of questions, right, in general.
It sounds like we need to maybe give a refresher course on riverfront planning that has occurred.
Sounds good.
And what,
I don't know.
There may
maybe
be a
it's
lot of-
refresher. It might be the first time some of it's.
Steve, think it may be that we get to be involved in a lot of these decisions that we don't realize we get to be involved in. Like, what, maybe you could help us with what's going to come before us in any of it. I mean, are we gonna? You understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. When will it come back to you? Yeah. It's hard, we don't know the answer to that, because we don't know.
Like, are we gonna have a say in the architectural design? Are we gonna have a say in the zoning? Are we gonna have a say in the?
And you had a say in zoning, because we dealt with rezoning the property and talking about building heights and the general framework and all that stuff. That was in 2016 now, it's been a few years. It's you as the Historic Landmark Commission having an opportunity to review architectural standards, that's baked in to the code. And I think just overviewing the riverfront planning and what's in the code will answer some of these questions. Because I think in some cases, it's just a matter of patience. It's a matter of us being aware, oh, okay, this kind of thing's happening, let's make sure the planning commission is involved. But like all the waterfront planning that's resulted to this, that there was, I mean, that goes back to the SSTAT exercise in 2014. And I know planning commissioners were involved in that because there was a huge amount of community involvement.
I think the waterfront thing is great. I think all of this stuff is great. And really, I'm not trying to, I want to make sure that, at least from my point of view, is point forward. how can we help? This is big and we want to be involved. And that's the main thrust of the that. And so how do we make that happen? And
I think the refresher's great, Jacob, that you guys, since we have, Steve and I are both new and we're part of the commission, then that you could just bring us up to speed maybe on what happened in the project before we got involved so that we know.
And where it's at now.
And I'm happy to set a meeting with you guys just to come and bring us up to speed if it doesn't.
Exactly what level we're at.
Yeah.
That sounds like.
I don't know if that will
sounds like an
satisfy
agenda
you.
item to me.
Start to.
yeah, I think let's just have an agenda item for the next meeting.
Yeah, refresh everybody, yeah.
Let's have and I still want to invite Main Street. I want to hear what I want those folks to come to our meeting on public record if they will. And I want them to say what they're gonna say because they have concerns about the city that I think impact all of us in the planning. I want the planning commission to hear what they have to say in a public forum.
So it's not just a matter, maybe not a matter, I think it would be benefit to have another meeting, not monthly meetings or a meeting, but it also sounds like, I mean, you have the ability, I believe, to set the agenda. If a commissioner wanted a specific item put on the agenda, what is the procedure to follow? So like, I know as a counselor, I can get stuff on the agenda, but I need to give notification to the mayor. Okay, so if a commissioner wanted something specifically on the planning commission, need to get a report about something, what does a commissioner need to do to get on the agenda? Who do they talk to?
We have the for your information section usually at the end, which I see is not on the agenda for today. Not sure why it got dropped. That's off the time when we can.
But I think in this case, it might be where they want specific information about something that's going to require homework or presentation that's not just asked, or maybe it's asked at for your information time, asking for it to be put on the agenda for next month.
Like we're doing right now.
Yeah, so I guess you can do that is if you want something on the agenda, who puts it to, who actually, do you put it together with,
Yeah.
so that,
Together.
so with the chair and so contact Chairman Carey and, ask if, I don't know.
They don't
The chair
check
doesn't,
it.
so who puts,
That's three.
you three? So I guess it would, who to contact, is it contact Christina? Contact Jenny, contact Jacob, who's to
I
say?
think what Dan is saying is that we bring it up during a public meeting and ask
Right.
for it.
So
we're all-
looking a month ahead of time, so like
Yes.
right now, if you want, if we're able to think a month ahead of time to say, can we have this on this specific thing? So like I hear Steve saying he'd like on the agenda, a presentation by the Main Street Alliance.
Well, like the Main Street Alliance to come and to provide presentation that they feel is appropriate for the planning commission. And also, I think that as far as, I think Jacob's suggestion about education and is a good thing. And it would help me get up to speed. So what I'd like to, some of the specifics would be, what is the timeline currently being considered? Where are we at with it? We've got these wonderful plans, and I'm prepared to resolve to say that the plans so far are great and everything is looking really good. And I have no criticisms whatsoever up until this point, on a personal level and as a planning commissioner too. I can't speak on behalf of all the rest of us, but I think that a wonderful job's been done.
And this is years of public vetting, years.
Well, and you know what? We should be very proud of it as a city, and I'm proud of it as a citizen, I'm proud of it as a commissioner. And I don't mean to get anybody defensive. I am simply looking for a way to contribute to this important process that we are in that is going to impact this city and everybody in it for generations to come. That's my sole motivation. And yeah.
Steve, I was just gonna say, you want to pack a bunch of stuff in the very next meeting, but I think that for efficiency, chunk it up a little bit. Maybe have the summary first next meeting, and then the Main Street guys come another meeting. You know, can't have them all at once. Would be here till, I don't know if you noticed my subliminal messages, my my background. I started out with sunshine, then I had sunset. Now I'm done to darkness. It's something I was going to try to see if it would shut down the meeting a little, but it's not working.
Bed.
Yeah, I agree.
I know.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
So.
It's getting late. It's getting late.
Just let's try to wrap some, because we're gonna probably not come back for another month, at least in a quorum.
You have a long commute?
So, yeah.
No.
Well, the Main Street Alliance, they just officially appointed their board, right? So they need a little bit of time to get their feet up. They were interim before, weren't they? And now they're,
Yes, yeah.
so gives them a.
Yeah, it's a whole new group of
Yeah,
folks.
I knew that.
Yeah. But they
We
said
all went to one of
their
their
agenda items are pretty much the same.
presentation.
Yeah, I haven't looked
Is
at
it a quorum problem if we all went to a Main Street meeting and we follow the same rules as city council people?
I know if it's council members, we can't, if two of us are there and a third shows up, one of us has to go. So I don't know about it, but I don't know if the same with the planning
I
committee.
think that when we have to work together, it's potentially something I haven't dug into it, but it's something that we need to be careful about.
Yeah, but if they invited the planning commission.
If it's not a public meeting, that's potentially a problem. I'm not comfortable with it right now, so I would have to look into
No,
it.
but couldn't we look into it?
Okay, so let's do this. Let's at least, okay, so let's at least resolve.
If you got ghosts in your tree, that.
Then at the next meeting, that Jacob will present to us where we are at with the riverfront development.
I know, I could.
And
you know how-
Planning.
or Jen, I don't care.
I know a lot of the background. I kind of know some stuff going on. But my head is not in it as much.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what's the status? What is the general idea of when we think
Got timeline.
timeline?
Yep.
Okay, and then I had more questions about this rubric thing, and
Yeah.
I think that was a good suggestion about how.
Let me
What is
chat
it then?
with our city administrator and see how we can involve. It might be of some I might try to get some feedback from you at this next meeting so I can kind of incorporate that, but I want to make sure I'm not overstepping because ultimately it's our city administrator who's managing this project. So I don't want to overstep as I'm a project manager, but I'm also assisting with him with this work. So
Okay.
I don't want to overstep, but I'd like to try to gather a little bit of feedback. So
Well, it sounds like a piece of the rubric is priorities, and I think that's
Yeah.
sort of where I'm
yes.
going with this is priorities.
But I think that's enough, because we've got Jacob giving some of the background, the history, the timeline, and maybe a feedback component. That's gonna be plenty, because I know we have some hearings
And
next week.
I'll be honest, I have a subdivision coming up.
Yeah.
And it's very possible that when we get, if I try to get this subdivision on the next meeting,
It's gonna be a long one.
I may need to get out of jail free card on that presentation. Now, I don't like to say that, but there are some things that are out of our control. I cannot control that the city engineer retired and now I'm responsible for this GIS project. I thought I was gonna help but not be the lead principal person. If you read my department report, you noticed I lamented on the fact that, well, I don't think I'm gonna have time to work on this next batch of code amendments, which was a very logical timing because we just completed the other ones. And it made a lot of sense to piggyback on that. I don't think that's gonna happen. I don't think it's gonna happen this year because the winter is a prime time. So I must stress practicality and finite time. I have to stress that because I've been doing this a long time and that is the reality. I want to be able to help. I want to be able to provide that information. It's what we just did for the city council to re-educate them on urban renewal and stuff. But there is that reality.
that we cannot lose touch with. And I'm not being defensive, I'm just saying that's just the world that we live in here, yeah, politics.
I understand, you've been.
So,
working
yeah,
hard.
no, I want to be able to help you, help this, I want to be able to help this entire commission with that, so you can answer those questions in the public. Absolutely.
Okay, then we'll table the Main Street thing, maybe, should we wait till, say, yes to March, or should we just, maybe we get some
Let's see
feedback
what
on.
February looks like, and then we can.
Well, and there's always visitor comments. I don't know, topics from the floor. So if they have 5 minutes and want to just.
I think the presentation's long.
Oh, okay.
I'm
I
trying
know
to
they
watch
have.
it, so.
Anyways,
Okay, so do we need to resolve that, or is this good enough what we've
no,
done?
we've got March.
Yeah, I think we understand, we'll put some things on the agenda to keep the dialogue going.
All right,
And probably, no, we'll emphasize the riverfront property this time around. Seems like that's the biggest thing on people's mind.
at least right now.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you, and thank you all again, and I'll just say again that I'll end it how I began, and that is to thank everybody for their efforts. And you've been doing a great job, absolutely.
I appreciate your enthusiasm, Steve. I'm not trying to quell it, but hold it back just a little bit there. Woo, where do we go?
Thanks, Dan. Thank you, Dan.
Christina hit the wrong button there.
Meeting adjourned.
Yes. Sounds good.
All right.
Bye, Dan.
25.
Bye.
Night.
And a little later student body, well, I guess staffing